If there's something strange in your neighborhood, who you gonna call?
Glowbusters.
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 Oh, who you gonna call?
This world is dark and evil with subliminals, but who you gonna call to fight all these criminals when the agenda is nothing but to feed you lies? Someone to fight the truth. We need two stand-up guys. We don't need no guns, no knives and no bats. I got a duo that will fight the globe with nothing but facts. NASA shaking in their boots that they can't relax. They be looking over their shoulder, just watching their backs, cause they're coming for ya. Nothing but truth sharing. The world doesn't need a hero. We got Bob and Jaron.
Glowbusters.
Who you gonna call?
Glowbusters.
Who you gonna call?
Glowbusters.
Who you gonna call?
Glowbusters.
Oh, who you gonna call?
Bob, Xanadu 60, and Jaron from Jaronism.
And welcome to Glowbusters Season 2, Episode 11. I am Bob, Xanadu60, your host. And we have a great show for you today titled Top Flat Earth Proofs. We have assimilated a whole bunch of not only proofs that prove the flat Earth, we believe, beyond any shadow of a doubt, but also disprove the globe. And we will be addressing not only the models themselves, but the rebuttals that typically come against these flat Earth proofs. So with that, we're going to proceed forward, and today, as always, finally, actually this week, we have Jaron back with us, complete with his dog, who was handed over to him by a neighbor last week, which he's really happy about. So how you doing, Jaron?
Doing fantastic, thanks, Bob. Yeah, I'm pretty happy, not as happy as Missa, but I'm happy, nonetheless.
I'll bet. Yeah, it's a drag to lose a dog. We've actually had our dogs run away from us twice, and both times we put flyers up, and within a day or so we had them returned to us. So that's pretty cool. So I'm glad to hear there's honest people out there.
Me too. I honestly felt by it was 5 or 6 o'clock on Monday that it wasn't going to happen. I had kind of given in. So, but then sure enough, here comes somebody to the door. So that was pretty awesome.
Yep, that's about typical the way it goes. Okay, and also I wanted to thank the Scarecrow. Crow, thank you very much for the intro. Hopefully I got it correct this time. I know the first time that I played it like 3 weeks ago, I accidentally had my Google Hangout audio set to voice, which gives you voice compression, and it kind of screws up any melody or any songs or anything like that. So I wanted to play it again, so at least it sounded good. So today I got it played on studio, and again, Crow, thank you so much for that. We're very honored and very appreciative that you made that for us, so thank you very much. So also today we have with us to help propose some of these facts is Antonio Subirats, who has accumulated his own bunch of not so much flat Earth proofs as much as other things, and we'll let him explain those to you, but some very interesting information that Antonio has for us. So how are you doing today, Antonio?
I'm doing very well, thank you. Were you going to say that I'm going to contribute to the preponderance of evidence?
Yes, you're going to continue into the preponderance of evidence, which, by the way, we are using that term correctly, contrary to some people's beliefs, but whatever. But yes, you will definitely be contributing to the preponderance of evidence, which, of course, there is a ton of it, and it ought to be a lot of fun. So,
cool.
Are you in the UK or Spain? You're still in the UK, right now,
yes,
Antonio?
Yes.
Okay.
I live in the UK. I'm only in Spain from time to time when I'm visiting relatives, but I'm permanently resident in the UK.
All right, there you have it. All right, so fair enough. So let's see, I've got the ISS and stuff queued up, and then I've got, let me get to one particular, I guess the first thing I want to start with, and we are going to be presenting, or I am going to be presenting, my personal picks for the top 3 flat Earth proofs that, in my mind, are simply undebunkable. That's not saying that there aren't people that have offered arguments that they believe debunk these top 3 proofs, but I believe that I have rebuttals for those debunkings, and I believe they're pretty sound. I mean, and I believe also that there's a lot more than just 3 proofs for flat Earth, and I'm not saying disproofs against ball Earth. I'm saying proofs for flat Earth. And those will definitely be coming up a little bit later on in the episode. But in the meantime, there's a few things that we all want to cover. And I will go ahead and start out by talking about this first video that I've got on the screen here, which is called Best Flat Earth Video, Deniers Pull Their Hair Out with Both Hands. And it's by a guy named VHSJBC, who generally has some very good videos, and this one I think is particularly interesting because what he specifically addresses in this is stresses that are present at the end of spinning objects. And the reason that I bring this up is because there have been many times that Jaron has made the statement, as well as all of us, I think, where if we are spinning on a ball and with the equators running at 1,040 miles an hour around the outside edge, we are all in disbelief that it can't be felt. Of course, the rebuttal to that, most people will give the example of, well, if you're flying along in an airplane at 500 miles an hour, you wouldn't feel it, which is generally true. However, you are at an angle, so there's an angular momentum there that you would actually be turning at, and thus brings in centrifugal force, which can be a highly stressful force on any object. And in fact, one of the things that this particular video does is it makes a consultation to, what is it? It is the Machinery Handbook, I believe, is what he's actually quoting in here, the Machinist Handbook. And the Machinery Handbook basically talks about 2 different types of forces that are present on spinning objects. You have the angular velocity of the object, but then you also have what's called an edge velocity. And the Machinery Handbook goes on to state not only mathematically, but also gives the rule of thumb where it says that the general rule of thumb for engineering is the bigger the object, the slower the safe spin speed. Okay, you can have little ball bearing wheels. He actually gives an example of a ball bearing wheel in here that they're spinning up to, I don't know, how many, 80,000 RPM, something like this?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, here it is, 80,000 RPM. He actually does it right before this. Let me go beyond this. Okay, so here we have the digital tach, and it'll actually get up to about 82,000 RPM on this. Okay, so that's all fine because that's a very small object. But the next example he will give, and this is very interesting, of course it doesn't fly apart or anything like this, but it does get very close to 80,000 RPM. But the next thing he gives as an example is a jet engine. Now a jet engine, in this particular engine that he took, which was made by Rolls-Royce, he uses a demonstration that Rolls-Royce was using to make sure that should one of the turbofans actually break loose from the inside of the jet, that it doesn't actually pierce the engine housing or go into the cabin or anything like that, or start any fuel leaks or anything like that, because it could be obviously catastrophic. So what they actually do in this particular test is they take and they put explosive bolts at the bottom of some of these fins that are spinning around. Now the engine itself only spins at 3,000 RPM. However, they say that there is some ungodly amount of tonnage that would be represented at the ends of each of these fins, which are at the very edge of the 3,000 RPM spinning motor. Okay, so that is the most dangerous thing. So one thing that had never really occurred to me when I was looking at this is that I didn't really realize that it was the edge velocity that was the most dangerous factor when you're calculating in stresses as an engineer. Of course, I'm not a mechanical engineer, but I have been definitely looking into this quite a bit, and it seems that that is absolutely the truth. So essentially, the reason that he chose this Rolls-Royce engine is because the blades, when calculated out, the velocity at the end of those blades at the diameter that they are spinning actually calculates out so that the blades, at the end of the blades, are running at about 1,000 miles per hour. And of course, as we all know, the equator of the Earth is allegedly spinning at 1,040 miles an hour. Now, the point that he makes here, and this is a very interesting point, is that it is, because of the fact it is the edge velocity that is the most dangerous and destructive, and also contains the brunt of all the centrifugal forces, right? And here he's actually going to do this. He says, you might think that a bearing spinning at 80,000 RPM is going faster than a jet fan spinning at 3,000 RPM, and certainly both examples are going faster than a fake Earth spinning at 1 revolution per 24 hours, right? And the answer to that is wrong. The bearing spinning at 80,000 RPM does not come anywhere near 1,000 miles an hour. However, the Rolls-Royce jet engine does. So what he's doing is he's making a comparison of objects spinning centrifugally around in a circle and the stress forces that are present there. And what he's showing here is that when they actually cut loose that vane inside of the Rolls-Royce engine that's spinning at 3,000 RPM, the destructive force is absolutely unbelievable. There's so much energy there that it's almost like off the scale. And he's presenting that as an analog to the 1,000 mile an hour Earth spinning to demonstrate that not only would we absolutely feel that angular momentum, even though it only calculates at an angular velocity of 0.000694 RPM, the edge velocity of the Earth is 1,040 miles an hour. And if you think about the Earth and you just cut it into a whole bunch of little sections, what you basically have is a bunch of spinning gyroscopes with the one around the center of the Earth that has the fastest edge velocity. And again, he got all this information from the machinery's handbook, and he says that the stresses are related more to the edge velocity than anything else, and that is regardless of the radius of the object that's spinning. Okay, so velocity on the bearing going 280,000 RPM is only 250 miles an hour. The velocity of the turbojet fans is about 1,000 miles an hour. Okay, velocity of the equator fake ball Earth is also about 1,000 miles an hour, 1,038, 1,040, whatever it is. And again, like I said, the rule of thumb is that the bigger the larger the object gets, the more stress it's going to have, the more angular stress it's going to have. Okay, edge velocity because of the edge velocity being 1,040 miles an hour. So that's something that I had never considered, but the more I think about that, the more I absolutely believe that it's true, because he says here, disruptive force depends slowly on rim velocity. It has nothing to do with angular velocity, which depends on radius. And the more I looked into that, the more I have found that that is absolutely true. I actually had a brother-in-law that was a machinist, and we talked about spinning objects and things that he machined at a certain point, and he said you have to be very careful because you get things spinning at too high of an RPM and they literally will tend to disintegrate. And of course, like I said, the determining factor is that edge velocity stress. So when we take this and we scale up this effect all the way to the size of the Earth, you can imagine that not only would we feel it, not only would things be flying off into space, but it could be potentially very dangerous and destructive as well. And not only that, science would even kind of tend to go along with that, because when you think about it, science tells us that the reason that the ball Earth is actually an oblate spheroid, then they say the reason for that is because of the centrifugal stresses that are present at the equator. They are so profound, in fact, that they cause the Earth to go from the perfect spherical shape that it would normally be, like all the other objects in our solar system, right? But because it's spinning, the stresses are so great that it actually flattens the Earth out, expands out the equator due to these incredible edge velocity stresses. Okay, so if it is strong enough, if the spin and edge velocity is spinning at 1,040 miles an hour, which is strong enough to actually distort the entire shape of the Earth, then one would have to obviously think that how could you not feel that when you're out there at the equator or any point along it going beyond supersonic speeds. That's the thing that never really resonated with me. I understand that most people's argument is, well, yeah, it's one revolution per day, which, like I said, is 0.00694 RPM. Okay, which, you know, in the large scheme of things, if you spin I don't know, just a frisbee that speed, it doesn't do anything. It's absolutely nothing. But when you scale it up to something the size of the Earth, it makes a huge difference. Now, here he is giving small demonstrations of people on a merry-go-round that are basically going maybe 20 miles an hour top speed, and people can't even stay on that. They're flying. They're absolutely flying off, and this is because of the edge velocity that's present on the merry-go-round. It has nothing to do with the RPM, but it's just the edge velocity. So if the edge velocity at 20 miles an hour is strong enough to throw these people off, we can only imagine what those forces must actually be at 1,040 miles an hour. Now, I am fully aware of both sides of the arguments. However, this is one particular area that I had never considered before. But to me, it makes perfect sense. And the more investigation I did of this little edge velocity fact that is brought forward by VHS JBC, the more I find out that it's absolutely true. And I don't see of any way that this can necessarily be debunked. And I'm kind of curious, what do you guys think about this?
I definitely see the same thing. I think that from what I've heard, as far as what we've always been told about going the constant speed, I had some interest in that, so I looked up about the speed because I wanted to see, is it constant? Is it 66,600 miles per hour all the time? And on a website, curious.astro.cornell.edu, they have a little Ask the Astronomer page, and one of the students asks about the speed, and the professor gives the answer, or the astronomer gives the answer, and says basically when we convert it and we take the 24 hours a day and we take the 365.25 days, it comes out to 67,000 miles per hour. And the student writes back, thanks for your explanation, but I was hoping for an explanation it would be a little more precise since I already knew the one you gave. Then I want to just read this answer that he gives after that, because this is something I'd never heard, and it completely disproves anybody who says, well, we don't feel it because of the constant speed. So he says, in case of your question about the speed of the Earth around the Sun, there isn't really a more precise answer. The only approximation I did in the calculation I sent you was assuming that the orbit of the Earth is circular. This is, in fact, a very good approximation. One of Kepler's laws describing planetary motion states that all orbits are ellipses. This is the case for the Earth's orbit, but not all ellipses come in the same shape. They are described by their eccentricity, which tells us how flat they are, and the eccentricity of an eclipse is the number varying from 0 to 1, 0 being a perfect circle, 1 being a flattened ellipse. This means it is almost a circle, making our approximation semi-valid. So under the approximation that was made, the calculation couldn't be really more precise. And as the average Earth-star distance, the true value changes slightly over time due to gravitational perturbations from the other planets. So there really isn't much of a point in using a more precise value than the one given above. If you want to calculate the speed of the Earth in its orbit without assuming it's a circle, it is another ballgame. First of all, I cannot give you a more precise answer, because the speed of the Earth is constantly changing all the time, because the Earth moves around the Sun, and due to Kepler's second law that is on its orbit, a planet has to sweep equal areas in equal amounts of time. This means that when the Earth is closer to the Sun, which happens in early January, about 2 weeks after the northern winter solstice, it's moving much faster than when it's farther away. For more information on how the Earth's speed varies over time, you can see this answer. But basically, I didn't know that the speed is changing. I thought that we were told 66,600. Since the planet is moving in that speed, I could kind of understand where people say, well, we wouldn't feel it. But not when you start telling me that the speed is constantly changing. That's exactly what we do feel, is acceleration, deceleration. So, I mean, that right there throws the whole thing out the window.
Yeah,
absolutely. There's also I'm echoing.
Uh-oh.
So
Don't say
when
that.
we-
Don't say that.
Okay. Am I okay?
Yeah, you're fine, Antonio. Go ahead.
Okay, so when people say, look, if you're traveling in a plane at 500 miles an hour, you don't feel the acceleration or the speed. It's like, oh, okay, well, let's make that into a more closer parallel to the globe. Let's remove the ceiling of that plane that's traveling at 500 miles. And then let's, instead of having air, ruffling everybody's hair, let's have that be a vacuum. Let's see what happens then. Because whenever people use that relativity parallel, they always exclude elements that are part of what the rest of the theory says, which is the atmosphere is a gaseous form. It doesn't have a rigid ceiling that's just as rigid as the ground. On the plane, the ground, the floor of the plane is just as rigid as the roof. So whenever anybody says that to any of us again, let's just say, okay, let's remove the roof and let's see whether we feel anything. Because they're obviously referring only to the motion part. Say, okay, we don't live on a globe that only has the motion part. We also have the outside of the atmosphere, and all of it together is the big theory. So let's make a parallel that addresses some of the other elements, like the freaking vacuum of space.
Yeah,
Yes.
totally. It's the same thing with they love to say that the atmosphere moves along with the Earth at the exact speed as the ground, which is fine. If that's the case, then everything moves completely consistently. But if that is the case, then how do you have Coriolis effect? That comes from the spinning Earth, causes the winds inside the system to spin in different directions. But you can't have both. You can choose one or the other. If you want to say it's a closed system, the atmosphere is traveling along with the Earth, everything's moving at the exact speed as the ground, that's fine. But you can't then say, well, and that spin causes winds to go a certain direction. Doesn't make any sense.
That's a good one. I like that.
Right. Yep, that's absolutely true. And also, Antonio, just to kind of expand on your taking the top off the airplane and exposing it to the vacuum of space, clearly what would happen is what should be happening to the Earth if space was truly a vacuum over the top of us. And what that is that the residual atmospheric pressure that is inside of the plane, as soon as you remove that roof and say you were in space, the atmosphere wouldn't be sucked out into space, but you would be blown out into space by the residual atmospheric pressure. And that is exactly what should be happening on the Earth. This whole notion that it is gravity that is holding in the Earth from a perfect vacuum, which would have a pressure differential that would be so enormous, well, frankly, honestly, it would probably be incalculable, because NASA tells us that space is nearly a perfect vacuum, which would have virtually zero air molecules or any type of atmosphere in it whatsoever. So there would be a huge pressure differential between anything with an atmosphere at all in it and space. And to say that the only thing that is holding in the atmosphere is simply the weight of the atmosphere itself, I mean, it doesn't even make any sense. I mean, anybody with half a brain can see that the common sense of that statement is non-existent. It makes no sense whatsoever.
Yeah. Also, with gravity having a stronger pull the closer to the massive form of the Earth, it means that the upper layers of the atmosphere are being pulled by the Earth's weakest layer of gravity. So the thinnest stratosphere, the exosphere, whatever you want to call it, that has the least pull towards the Earth from the Earth's gravity. So it's the thing that would be most easily escaped into the vacuum of space. All of it's just a nonsense.
Right, and one would also think that at 1,040 miles an hour at the equator, if the vacuum wasn't sucking the atmosphere off into space, it would be thrown off centrifugally. So, and that goes back to this thing that I've got brought up now. It says stresses in flywheel rims. In general, high speed is desirable for flywheels in order to avoid using wheels which are unnecessarily large and heavy. The stress which tends to rupture a flywheel rim of given area depends solely upon the rim velocity. I'm going to say that again. It depends solely on the rim velocity. and is independent of the rim radius, which can be proved as follows. And of course, it gives you the mathematics for it. Mathmagics, however you want to, for those of you that really care about this and cannot see the common sense behind it. The engineering manual tells us straight up that here's the formula for that edge velocity. It will give you the centrifugal force in pounds. And so if we are to actually apply this to a 1,000-mile-an-hour edge velocity object, the centrifugal force is going to be simply off the scale, and things are going to be flying off like gangbusters. So anyway, this is something that is within the realm of mainstream science and engineering that tells us point blank that an edge velocity of 1,040 miles an hour is simply impossible without the center of the Earth essentially disintegrating. So
yeah, you've just reminded me of something else. So in the formation of the Earth, at some point it was just small particles that coalesced because of some gravitational point, and it became bulkier and bulkier and started spinning. And at the point at which it starts spinning, it would then start to pizza dough out, because it wouldn't be rock hard. It would have been just the minute it started speeding, the centrifugal force would have made all the loose material fan out. So it wouldn't give any chance for any dense iron core to make its way to the center. It would have to make its way out from the center due to centrifugal force. The whole of the theory is nonsense.
Right, because if you had stuff actually spinning like that, I mean, it could potentially turn a ball into an oblate spheroid. Oh wait.
But the thing is, it should have been, if anything, a disk. Not to move anybody onto a disk world, but what should have happened from things orbiting the sun spinning is all of the planets should look like the rings of Saturn. All of them. That's the shape that all of them should have if planets were a thing that were real. So, and none of them are. All of them are balls. So we're looking at magical thinking.
Yep, we surely are. And so anyway, this is a video that I will be posting in the show notes at the end of the show. It's a fantastic video, by the way. I would love people to go through it, critique it. Tell us what you think. I think it's pretty difficult to refute. And if so, and if you want to use the math, by all means, use the math to refute the math that's here, even though the math here seems to go along with common sense and observation of spinning objects, practical experience, everything that we would actually use to prove an idea besides just math. But in this particular case, the math seems to go along with observed phenomenon. So by all means, people watch this, critique it, leave your comments on it, and let us know what you think. This is not the only area that I have researched on this. I actually have a whole bunch of material that I looked at over the last couple of weeks since I saw it, and yeah, it's amazing. But this is absolutely dead on. So I will put that up there for everybody's commentary.
I'll just make a quick point because I did hear a couple people say, and I saw some Twitter messages that Jaron doesn't believe in math. Jaron says math is useless. I've never said anything close to that. What I said was math doesn't prove reality, and by that I mean orbits. That's what we were talking about. And if you're talking about money, I will never question math and money. Meaning, if you take $5 plus $5, it will always be $10. That's proven. It can be shown in front of me. It can be shown to anyone. And that's a fact. Now, when it comes to orbit and orbital mechanics, I do not think that just because the math tells us that orbital mechanics work, it does not mean it's been proven. It doesn't mean it's been proven to me because I can't see it. It can't be reproduced. It's completely different on a completely different level than even what Bob was just talking about, where those things can be shown in other objects, in tests, in the lab, and then we can say, yes, the math does prove these forces. But there is no way we can measure orbits or show them to exist unless we're NASA and we're out in a helium balloon flying around the planet.
Yeah.
Yes.
So with the maths proving things, I love Gandalf, and Gandalf's coat must have been made of some weave, and all of that can be translated into mathematics. You know, what kind of weave, the thickness, and it doesn't mean that it's true or real. It's just a way of translating something into mathematics, the same as orbital mechanics.
Yes, very good. Okay.
I did want to say though, Bob, maybe when people go to the page showing what you just showed, with the flywheel, maybe we could make a suggestion to stand a GoFundMe campaign for the back injuries all those guys got.
Yeah.
Have you seen?
Right.
I mean, that looks like torture. And it's funny that the ones that usually fly off directly onto the bike or the people standing. It's like, oh, maybe gravity does work.
Oh yeah. Oh, I know. Like on the merry-go-rounds. Yeah, that does look a little painful, and that's going at a very, very slow edge velocity. So that's it's very interesting to look at that. But yeah, we'll definitely have that in the show notes, and I'll be looking forward to anybody's mathematical debunking or critiquing of it, because, like I said, this is taken directly from you know, an engineering handbook for like machinists or whatever. Well, for any type of mechanical engineer. So we'll just go forward from that. And okay, so I'm going to go ahead and wrap that up, and I'm going to go to one other thing that I also wanted to cover. And this has to do with the arguments against the 8 inches per mile squared formula that flat earthers are using to determine the curvature of the Earth. Okay, so a lot of people have talked about this formula, and they try and invalidate it. They say it's invalid because we are not using the geodesic formulas, essentially, that, you know, would be calculating this from a spherical object, which to me is absurd, because that's exactly what we're doing. But they seem to always come back and they always say, no, you have to calculate it like this. And if you look at this little diagram in the lower right-hand corner, this is an example of the type of geodesic math that people are saying that has to be used in order to accurately calculate the curvature of the Earth. And so let's look at this for a minute. And I'm going to go ahead and read this out loud in case anybody can't see it. But it says the calculation should be taken as a guide only as it assumes the Earth is a perfect ball. 6,378,137 meters radius. It also assumes the horizon you are looking at is at sea level. Okay, fair enough. A triangle is formed with the center of the Earth, C. Okay. As one point, the horizon point H is a right angle, and the observer, O, is the third corner. Okay. Using Pythagoras' theorem, we can calculate the distance from the observer to the horizon, OH, knowing CH is the Earth's radius and CO is the Earth's radius, plus observer's height above sea level. Okay? So we are clearly seeing here an example using geodesic math, and this is what everybody would say, or the detractors, I should say, are saying that we should be using instead of the 8 inches per mile squared. So, okay, fair enough. So let's check this. Let's check the veracity of this calculation against our 8 inches per mile squared. Okay, so let's just take an observation height, willy-nilly, whatever. How about let's take 18,000 feet? Okay, so we'll say 18,000 feet high, and we're going to go in feet, and we're going to calculate the distance to the horizon. Okay. So, our little handy-dandy calculation using geodesic math says that the distance to the horizon is 164.4 miles. All right, cool. Well, so if this is anywhere close to reality, or if our 8 inches per mile squared formula is anywhere close to reality, there should be somewhat of a jiving between these two. They should, you know, be at least somewhat on the same page. So let's find that out. And by the way, one thing I will mention, that the 8 inches per mile squared is actually a roundup from about 7.9989 inches per it's 7.9989 inches, okay, instead of the 8 inches, but we're going to use the 8 inches just for the fun of it. Okay, so we're going to do the reverse calculation. We have already done our distance to horizon calculator here for calculating 18,000 foot observation, and then that gives us a distance to the horizon of 164.4 miles using geodesic calculations. So let's take and let's now plug in our 8 inches per mile formula, and we will say 164.4, okay, it's got to be squared, times 164.4 equals, and then times 8 inches, times 8, okay, gives us 216,218.88 inches of curvature. Okay, now let's change that back to feet. Divided by 12 equals, well, look at that, 18,018.24 feet as compared to 18,000. And of course, if we would have used our 7.9989 figure, it would have been 18,000 right on the nuts. Okay, so another way we can also calculate this. I see somebody saying dishonesty. It carries it out about another 20 decimal points. That's very funny. Anyway, so now let's look at the very base of it. So let's say we're going to go 8 inches. What's the distance to the horizon for 8 inches of observation height? So in feet, 8 inches is going to be none other than 0.666 feet is 8 inches. 2/3. Calculate distance. Oh, look what we have there. 1 mile. So there we have it, guys. We have geodesic math agreeing 100% with our 8 inches per mile squared formula. So forgive me if I am wrong, but it seems to me like we've got a pretty dead even match here. What do you guys think?
Absolutely.
No doubt.
Yeah.
Yep. So there we have it, using two different schools of thought, two different methodologies, two different maths, so to speak, even though they're not really. We have just proven beyond any shadow of a doubt that the 8 inches per mile squared formula is 100% correct. Anybody that...
Oh, go ahead.
I was just saying, anybody that cares to, rebut that, feel free. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say that, and building off that, if that is the case, if we can all agree on the 8 inches per mile squared for the size ball that they give us, then we just need to look at surveying, and whether it's land surveying, there's two main categories, but one of them is plane surveying, and look it up in a book, look up a plane surveying manual, and you'll see I've seen numbers ranging anywhere from 50 to 250, meaning it is okay to assume that the Earth is a flat plane, as all angles are considered plane angles for areas less than 250 kilometers. Now that is 155 miles. So if we can assume that the Earth is flat and 155 miles, doing our 8 inches per mile squared, we get about 15,225 feet, which is 3 miles of curvature. So how does that work? You're allowed to consider it, it's flat, might as well call it flat, but it's really 3 miles in curvature. It means 3 miles below your feet. I mean, that's all you need to see to realize the scam that's been pulled on all of us. We can stop arguing about it and stop going on and on. It's clear that even the surveying teams can look at 250 miles. They don't even blink an eye. I'll read you this right here. It says, plane surveying is a type of surveying where the mean surface of the Earth is considered as a plane. All angles are considered plane angles. For small areas, it says small areas, less than 250 kilometers, plane surveying can be safely used for most engineering projects such as canals, railways, highways, buildings, pipelines, etc., constructions. I mean, do you really want them building you a bridge? That's why bridges don't need to take that into account, because it's on a much smaller place than we would need. But again, we would need to be paying attention every half mile if the Earth was curved.
And 250
Absolutely.
kilometers is not very small, is it?
No.
Yeah, no, not at all. And just for fun, Jaron, I mean, I know you did it, the calculation from California to Hawaii and came up with 700 and some odd miles. So I decided to do it from Denver because we quite often, in fact every year, fly from either Denver to Maui or Denver to Honolulu. It's essentially the same thing. But so I went ahead and plugged in Denver to Maui into the curvature formula. And the distance from Denver to Maui is 3,277 miles. I have taken this flight many times as a passenger. I'm never as a pilot, but I am a pilot. But I've taken it many times as a passenger. And the curvature between Denver and Maui that we would actually be going down would be 1,356 miles in a downward direction.
Or up. You can't say down because then what's a plane coming back doing? So
Well, yeah, there is that. Then it's coming back down, you know. Well, it kind of brings a lot more credibility to what I usually tell Jaron when he gets up and he's complaining about going to school in the morning, because, you know, I tell him, well, when I was younger, I had to walk 10 miles to school every day in the snow, uphill both ways. So, you know, I wasn't lying about the uphill both ways, okay?
Oh, man, back when the Earth was curved, we used to have to fly uphill and downhill, 789 miles. Hey,
you guys have just made me think. Oh, sorry. Go on.
I just was going to tell him, what's the distance Colorado to California?
Ooh, which part to which part?
Let's say Denver to Monterey. I'll find out for us because I want to see that how much curvature is there. That's just a couple states, right? 2 states away. Unless you're the USA Today, then you're wrong. But I want to see what that is because we've got the Sierra.
1,252.6 miles.
There you go. And then what's the curvature on that?
Well, let's see. Let's do it really quick. So I'll do it one way, you do it the other. I'm going to do it using the horizon. So if I go 1,252.6 times 5280 gives us 6613728. (6613728) in feet. Calculate distance. You got whoopsie, I think I messed up there. Oh no, that's right, 3390. No, it isn't. That's not right. I totally screwed that up. Let's do it the right way.
It was 1,356.
Yeah, what was our mileage again? I'm sorry.
1,356, I think you said.
All right. Yeah, that sounds about right. 1,252. Wow, we're on a roll today, aren't we? All right. So 1, 2. We'll just use 1,252 times 1,252 times 8 equals divided by 12 equals divided by 5280 gives us 197 miles of curvature between Denver and Monterey.
Okay, and then you've got we know we have the Sierra Nevadas in between us, and that's I think that 15,000 feet would be the most, right? Maybe 3 miles at the highest. So we got to make up the rest of that curvature. I mean, even if you take the mountains, and if you go up the mountains, you come back down the other side. So it just makes no sense how it could even be close to that.
Okay, and there we just checked it. So I converted that curvature back into feet, and we got 1,268 miles here, which is very close to the 1,252. And again, that would have been lower had I had gone to the 7.99 whatever. But in any event, it checks. Okay, now, oops, you still there, Jaron?
Yep, I'm here.
Oh, okay, I just want to make sure I didn't lose you. But anyway, yeah, so we're dealing with massive curvatures that, you know, me as a pilot and as a passenger, I have never observed the plane dropping that much or that much of an attitude. And so, you know, I thought about that anymore. Oh, by the way, here's another calculator that I found that will not only allow you to do it across the horizon, but if you have an aircraft up in the air and he's looking at an object, you know, that's down, it gives you for both radar and visual. But it
Right.
uses the exact same formula, and it checks out both ways, by the way, and I've already checked this, so there's no reason to actually go through this, but I will put this calculator in the link just for people to have a second source to reference what we're doing here, but it's absolutely correct.
Hey, can I just add something?
Sure.
It's kind of vaguely related to the curvature. So the globe is spinning and traveling in its orbit and traveling along with the sun northwards. You know, the trajectory of the sun is northwards. So a plane taking off in the north to the north, the journey it's making is permanently staying ahead of the Earth, which is rising northwards. Is it 660,000 miles an hour, the speed of the sun? This is the northwards motion, you know? So the plane is staying ahead of the Earth whilst it's flying. A plane in the south is keeping up with the Earth as it's flying, because the Earth is moving away from it, is it not?
Mm-hmm.
It's just another one of these ridiculous things about the globe and the whole motion of the spheres through space that people don't sit and think about.
Yes, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So let's see, where's this other? I'm looking through all my notes here. I also had another little bit of math that I did. Let's see, that talks about an aircraft as it's flying along, typical at 500 miles an hour, which is about right for most commercial aircraft. 500 miles an hour, or what, 800 kilometers an hour, I guess would be correct, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so go ahead, Jaron. I'm still looking for this. So say what you're going to say.
Oh, was I going to say something?
Hey, I want to say something about your dog. You know, you thought that you weren't going to get your dog, but lots of people found out that, you know, the dog had gone missing. And, you know, you were saying about stalking Big Ben with intent.
Mm-hmm.
I think that everybody's intent, thinking, I hope Jaron gets his dog back, is what might have brought it back, along with the Flyers.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that, because I did have good hopes throughout all of Sunday and early Monday, but no, I mean, I need to, you know, practice what I preach, because I definitely started to succumb, and so if people kept hoping later on Monday, thank you very much. I appreciate that. My wife appreciates it.
Cool.
So thank you very much for that. But no, I mean, as far as the curvature goes, just, you know, take that math and figure out different distances, and you'll be able to see. One of the funnier things, I think, when I think back to when I very first started this now 15 months ago, is if you go back to one of my early videos, I don't remember which video it is, but I'm talking about the curvature between Florida and London, and I thought it was 8 inches per mile. I didn't know it was squared. And I'm talking about, I think it was a distance of like 2,300 miles. And when I multiplied that out, so you have 2,300 miles and times 8 inches per mile, and then I divided that, you know, by the 5280, and it came out to like 3 miles. And
You got a big ass slope.
yeah, and I was livid. You should hear me in the video. I'm like, there's no way there's 3 miles of curvature between us and Detroit. And it turns out it's like hundreds of miles. It's just funny because even if it is 8 inches, the amount of curvature is ridiculous when you take any distance between two locations. I mean, I think that the curvature, if I remember right, between California and Florida is 650 or plus miles. And I mean, people need to grasp what that is. I mean, just think of the ISS when it flies above you and it's that little tiny dot is supposedly 250 miles away or 250 miles ahead above you. I mean, how would there be enough curvature to calculate 650 miles? Where is that curvature between here and Florida? It's ridiculous. It simply doesn't exist.
Yeah, isn't Mount Everest something like 5 miles?
Yeah,
Or 7 miles high?
Mountain is 5 miles.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
that's
it's unbelievably high.
Yeah, so that's 5 miles. Let's think about 250 miles. Let's
Or
think,
650. Yeah.
Yeah, it's
What does a plane fly? So at maximum 8 miles.
yeah.
I mean, that's
Right.
That's the highest any of us have ever been, is 8 miles. Yet we go, if you travel from California to Florida, you're going down or up 650 miles of curvature.
Or 1,300 from Denver to Maui or whatever. Right? It's the whole notion is just utterly ridiculous, and I'm going to actually highlight that point once again. But one thing I do want to say before we even go further with this is that the 8 inches per mile squared formula is, of course, assumed to be accurate if you are on a perfectly spherical object. Now, what they have told us, what NASA has told us, is not only have they told us that the Earth is an oblate spheroid, but as of Neil deGrasse Tyson's latest assertions, it is a little bit chubbier at the bottom or below the equator than it is above the top. It's kind of pear-shaped, as he says. So what that would mean, and this isn't going to mean a lot, and I'm sure the mathematics people are going to come out and say, oh, it's only 0.00 whatever difference, but the bottom line is what that means is if there's less curvature below the equator because of its pear-shapedness and oblateness, that means that necessarily anywhere in the northern hemisphere, that curvature formula is going to be more than 8 inches per mile squared for the northern hemisphere, and it would be less than that for the southern hemisphere. That's common sense, right? So, but let's just stick with the 8 inches per mile, even though it would technically be more. And let's give you an idea of how much curvature that is and what that means for an average passenger airliner. Okay, passenger airliners, let's just say that they cruise at an average cruise speed of 800 kilometers per hour or 500 miles per hour. Okay, so what that means is that if a commercial airliner is flying along at that 500 miles an hour, and we have already established the 8 inches per mile curved, 8 inches per mile squared curvature, that means that at 500 miles an hour or 800 kilometers per hour, the pilot would have to be descending at a rate of 850 meters per minute or 2,800 feet per minute in just a passenger aircraft to match the curvature of the Earth, to maintain the level. Now think about that for a second. That is over a half a mile a minute descent that a pilot would have to be making in a standard commercial airliner to simply maintain his relative altitude above the ground.
Put it
And
into,
we would definitely feel that. We would
You would
definitely
feel it.
that.
You would see it, you would feel it. There would be nothing that would not be noticeable about that. But you know what? It doesn't happen,
No.
Which pretty much tells you that we're not traversing along a curve. So, how do you debunk that?
It's easier to put it into feet too, because a lot of people think a half mile, oh, that doesn't seem like very much. But when you remember that you're only 30,000 feet high, and that means you're going 2,500 feet down every minute, that's crazy.
Right, and that's why for the UK people and other people besides the United States that use
There
other
is nobody else
systems.
besides the United States.
That's right. It's just screw all you guys. No, but that's why I did it in meters, kilometers, and miles per hour and feet, because that kind of reaches everybody. 800 kilometers an hour is 500 miles an hour. 850 meters per minute is 2,800 feet per minute, or over half a mile every 60 seconds. It just doesn't happen, guys, and it's absurd to even think that it does. Anybody that has a pair of eyes at all, even if they have Coke bottles for glasses, can tell you that there is no way that we're making any type of descent in any type of commercial flight going anywhere that anybody has ever been on. If somebody can tell me that they've actually noticed that, not only would I call them a liar, but I'd probably think that they had to be some sort of miracle person if it was true, to not notice that much drop every single minute of a flight. So, and then you look at
Sorry, Bob. I was
those
gonna
jets.
say-
Okay, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think now will be an opportune time, in case anybody is new listening, for you to mention the fact that you're a pilot.
Yeah.
Just because you are a pilot. You do fly.
I am a pilot. I was first licensed in 1978. which equates to a long-ass time ago.
I won't tell anybody before I was born.
Yeah, I have many thousands of hours in several types of aircraft, commercial, instrument, multi-engine, land. I've been flying for a long time. I absolutely, when I first started taking my flight lessons, was actually in the Air Force because I'll tell you, that's the cheapest way to get a pilot's license for anybody is actually in the military. It cost me for a Cessna 152 when I first started out in my private pilot lessons, and people are going to die when they hear this, but for a brand new Cessna 152, when I first started flying, it was $10 an hour wet in 1978, which is ludicrous, crazy, cheap. And it was also $10 an hour for an instructor. So, you know, I was investing a whopping $20 an hour in the Air Force for flight instruction, which is great. But yeah, so the bottom line is when I got my pilot's license, not only did we have no computers running aircrafts, we did not have GPS running aircraft. We had simple mechanical gyros and barometric pressure altimeters and stuff like this. They had radar altimeters, but I've only been in one type of plane that actually had a radar altimeter. That was a Cardinal RG, and those are kind of rare, very expensive avionics. But yeah, definitely I'm a pilot, and you know, the more you think, and also they never teach you in ground school when you're doing any type of navigation, they never teach you anything about having to factor in any curvature of the Earth, any Coriolis effect for any cross-country trip, anything like that. It just simply is not in the curriculum. And there's a good reason why it's not in the curriculum, and that's because the Earth is flat. You don't have to compensate for anything to do with a ball because we're not on a ball. The Earth is flat. It's as simple as that. So, you know, there you have it, Antonio.
I can't talk. I've officially died since you told me how much you were paying for your lessons.
I know, isn't it? Can you believe that? $10 an hour wet. God, the good old days. I wish.
Yeah. Wow.
So yeah. So anyway,
3 links over here just so you can show these, but they're just images. One of the things I still hear from people is them talking about, well, we would be able to see forever if if the Earth was flat, and people don't understand that the atmospheric conditions are going to slowly get rid of your sight. So that picture there that you have up is just showing clearly you can see what's right in front of you, and as you step away, we don't see the Earth falling away there. We see the features becoming more and more clouded with the amount of atmosphere that's in between you and that furthest mountain, which you can kind of actually see an outline of. It's certainly not falling away. It's just not the way it works. These other ones are actually better than that one too. Let me find this one.
Okay, you want me to bring up the next one? Here, I'll bring up the next one. There's that one. And yeah, you're right. And another thing I want to say about this, Jaron, is that the reason that we can't see, you know, from one side of the world to the other, obviously you're saying that the atmospheric conditions are absolutely a huge factor. There are particulates in the air that are not only there naturally from dust or whatever. Obviously we have the chemtrail sprayers going on daily, and we've got so much of a powdery particulate in the air now that it greatly reduces visibility from when I was a kid. I mean, you could see for hundreds of miles, literally, you know, back in the 60s and 70s when I was growing up, because we didn't have all this crap in the air that they're spraying. Secondly, another factor that gives us haze is humidity, is moisture in the air, which definitely cuts down on your visible line of sight, you know, how far you can see because of the moisture particulates. Now, one thing that I will say that the moisture and the particulates in the air do actually do, and this is something that I kind of also want to address to those of you that have seen like David Weiss's videos that he has posted, the sun moving away from us, and it's getting smaller, and it appears to be getting smaller and smaller and smaller before it eventually goes down over the horizon. And also, we've seen conversely, you know, sunrise doing the same thing. What I will say is that sometimes you will get an effect where you can photograph it, even with filters on the sun, and you will see, sometimes you will see a very distinct size change in the sun, and other times not so much. And what this has to do with largely is a phenomenon called atmospheric lensing, okay? And essentially what it is when you get water particulates in the air like that, or any type of particulates, and you look through enough of it, horizontally, it will actually begin to act somewhat like a magnifying glass, okay? So what that means is if it's sunrise, let's say for example, and the sun is just coming up over the horizon, for the ball earthers, or around the corner and into visual sight for the flat earthers, either way, we're both perceiving a ball, and a lot of times at sunrise and sunset, the sun will look a whole lot larger than it does at midday. Well, why is this? Well, the reason for that is because on a day that has a particularly high humidity or a high particulate level of water in the atmosphere, you will get that atmospheric lensing effect that will actually magnify the sun so that it looks considerably bigger when it's far away because of the magnification. Now, as it comes towards you, not only is it taking a position that appears to be going up higher over the top of you, but again, this is nothing more than perspective, but as it's coming towards you, you are lifting your line of vision to where you're not looking through so much of the horizontal atmosphere, but you're getting away from it and you're lifting not only up into the less dense atmosphere, which will give you less of a magnification effect, as well as typically you will have, like in California, I know it always seems to be overcast there in the morning, and then typically during the day it burns off because the humidity kind of evaporates off. And that also removes some of this atmospheric lensing effect. So that is why that sometimes you will see this distinct magnification in the sun, and other times you will not. Now, because of the fact in the flat Earth model that the sun is only 3,000 miles up, 3,000 and 4,000 miles up roughly, and is actually going around in circles in a flat plane above the Earth, then obviously when we see the sun going away from us, or when it's just rising, it's going to look, it would look further away when you have lower humidity. However, when humidity increases, it's going to look a little bit closer because it's been magnified. So I just wanted to address that and let people know that there are definitely atmospheric factors that factor into the magnification of the sun and the moon when they are on the horizon versus to where they are seemingly straight above us vertically in the sky. So I did want to kind of just point that out as well.
And that can be shown too, because you can go to a boardwalk or anywhere where there's a row of street lights, and the furthest street light from you will look the brightest and biggest. And that's the same exact effect. Or if you stand on a bridge and you watch a freeway at night and cars are coming towards you, that light is going to look, the lights on the cars that are furthest away look largest.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Also, anybody who goes to the beach at sunrise or sunset, when you have atmospheric lensing, you see a rather large sun, but when you look on the ocean, you have the reflection of the sunlight, and that reflection is scattered slightly. It's a bit wider because of the shape of the ripples, but the reflection is always narrower than than what you're seeing, and that's because the reflection is reflecting the sun itself, not the atmospheric lensing that the sun is causing in its journey between it and your eyes.
Yes.
Yeah, very good.
In this image here, you can see that it's clearly it's diminishing as you go away, not because it's falling off of a ball, but because, like what Bob said, there's smog and fog and dust and dirt and you name it, mist. All those things are getting in your way, and just regular atmosphere. And then also another argument I've been still seeing people use, and I would, I've stopped using it because I no longer feel that it's correct, but I don't think there's a question anymore, or it's not important to me at least, whether or not this is curved. Meaning most people might look at that and say, oh, there was a curvature there. And I see people drawing lines on, I'm not mentioning any names, but some people will take an image and get a straight line and draw a line on it and try and show that it's flat. That makes no difference to me anymore, because if you take my kitchen table, which is round, and you looked at it from an angle, well, you're going to have a curvature at the end of the table. It doesn't mean that I eat breakfast on a sphere. So it doesn't matter if you do see a curvature. Your eyes will do that to you. We all know that. That's just because of the way things look. That if you're looking straight ahead, your eyes can pull the things right and left back towards you a little bit and give it that perspective of is rounded, which even mainstream science will admit. They'll point where you are and they'll say that you can see in a circle around you. So if that's true, and we just proved here, you can see that mountain there in the back, it's getting lighter. The one behind it would be even lighter. So yeah, can we see the Tokyo from here? Sure, but you've ran out already at that second mountain of the ability to see further than that. But if you can see in a circle, then you are going to always be given a curved horizon given enough height. So yeah, from the Earth, you're from down at Earth level or ocean level, you're not going to see any curvature from there. But when you get higher, maybe, and I don't even think a plane would be necessarily high enough, but I've seen some plane images that certainly appear to be a curved horizon. And if it were a case of the only thing that gives us a curved horizon is a sphere, that would be pretty good evidence of the Earth being a sphere. However, anything that's flat can give you a sphere edge, especially if we only can see in a sphere around us. Then technically everything would give you a sphere, everything would give you a curved horizon if you were up high enough.
Yeah, absolutely right.
Also, sorry, Bob. The shape of the eye, the lens, and the cornea, the interaction between the two is supposed to balance out the curve, but your orientation, the same as a GoPro lens, will shift and cause warping, perceived warping. This is an illusion that is received by the brain as it translates what it's receiving. So being able to tell whether or not what you're seeing is curvature with your own eyes is a moot point, really.
Yeah, exactly. And it's interesting you mentioned that also, Antonio, but another YouTuber, Curious Life of a Flat Earther, just came out with a video, and I've actually got it here up here on the tabs. We'll be talking about it in a little bit, where he's talking about how the eyes are acting essentially as a gyroscope, and the points he makes are very well taken and actually quite provable, and we'll talk about that in just a little bit also. But I did want to bring that up. But one of the things that I also wanted to comment about what we would be seeing if we were on a sphere versus if we were just on a flat plane, would be, of course, going back to the perspective. People say, oh yeah, well yeah, maybe you can't see any curvature, but if you get high enough, you can. Well, Reg Rhetoric, I don't know if you guys saw this, but Reg Rhetoric debated Zeticism.com a few weeks back. And I was actually amazed that Zeticism.com actually missed this, but Reg Rhetoric made the assertion that, oh, but you can see the Earth curve when you sharpen it up, when you harden the edge, you can absolutely see the Earth curve out here at the horizon, like on the right side of a picture was the example he was giving, and you can see that it's actually curving down a little bit. Well, the problem with that is that you would never, even if the Earth was a ball, you would never see the curvature off in the horizon curve down at the edge, because it doesn't work that way. If you are on a ball, imagine yourself standing on top of a ball, okay, and you're looking out 360 degrees. First of all, if you saw an edge that was dropping down towards the lower right-hand corner of your frame of reference, where does that edge actually drop down to? It doesn't drop down anywhere, because you can turn around and you can pivot around in a 360-degree circle and see that same flat horizon all the way around you. Now, if you were truly standing on a ball, and as you rose up, not only would you see the horizon fall away from you equidistantly all the way around in a 360-degree circle, you would never actually necessarily detect a curve in that either, because the horizon, the only thing that you would see would be the horizon dropping down further and further and further. The higher up you went, the lower the horizon drops. Well, unfortunately, the higher you go, the horizon is not dropping off like it would when you are on a ball. It stays at eye level. When you look at with your eyes out to the horizon, horizon means horizontal. Horizontal means level. Level means flat. Okay, it has nothing to do, with seeing curvature when you get up that high, because on a ball, you would not see curvature. You would see a horizon falling away from you in all directions, 360 degrees. That does not happen. If you saw something curve off, from a certain degree, you have to wonder, well, what does that curve go to? And if you turn the other way, does it fall off equally the other direction? And if so, what happens when you turn 180 degrees? What happens to the horizon there? Are you trying to say that the horizon's curving off on both sides from whatever direction you're looking at? Well, that's simply impossible. So all it takes is a little bit of common sense and a little bit of visualization. Picture yourself standing on a ball, rising above it, and you will see the horizon fall away from you equidistantly in all directions. So that's something that's very important to point out. You would not see a curve even if you thought there was one, because it just simply doesn't work that way. End of story.
And I dropped another link there, Bob. Just
Okay.
a picture of a table, but you can also bring up that other one. It's probably a good time to show that image I sent you from that video where it shows the Earth being hit by or being taken from space, supposedly. And they use the curvature lens, the fisheye lens, and it's clear, like you said, if you kept turning, same thing here. This is just a kitchen table that's taken from an angle that gives a curve. How does that prove a sphere? It doesn't. It proves nothing. It means nothing. Whether it's flat, curved, it does not prove a sphere. A sphere would be self-evident. By what Bob said, as you raised up, you would see it falling away from you. Go to a beach, look out at the ocean, and tell me why would the ocean rise from your feet to your eye level if you're on a ball? It would stay at your feet level, and it would go out, and it would fall away from you and not rise up. We don't have a hump going up from us and then down from us. It doesn't work that way. It doesn't work like a ball would work at all in any way. So yeah, if you bring up that other tab, Bob, I gave you, I'll just explain that real quick.
Okay, and before I do that, I just want to throw in one more thing. Now, if a person was out at the edge or standing near the Antarctic wall, and if the ball was, if the Earth was truly like a frisbee, a flat circular thing, of course we don't know what's beyond it, but say there was an edge and it was the Antarctica edge. If we were close enough, we would see something like this, right? But that's only because we're at the outer edge of the edge. Now, whether or not the Earth actually terminates in a circle all the way around us, or that's simply where the dome would be mounted, and it's like an infinite plane, that's something that obviously we can't address, as we have no direct evidence, either way, unless we take what Admiral Byrd said literally, and that being that there was a huge amount of land beyond what we're perceiving or what we're calling the South Pole. Mm-hmm. So anyway, okay, so going back, so I'm going to close this. And which one are we looking at? This one? Or
the
no?
one I sent you before the show, just that picture of the Bahamas or the Caribbean.
Okay.
I don't remember where you.
That's not it. This one?
Yeah.
All right.
So, I mean, this picture here is clearly, GoPro'd, and you have to ask yourself, why would they do that? If you look at the little piece of land there on the left, or straight ahead kind of at the left, and you take that distance to the edge of the land that you can see on your right, that is 650 miles. And we know that the diameter of a ball, or the Earth, a ball the size of the Earth, is 8,000 miles. So they just took, you figure that's maybe, let's give them the benefit of the doubt and say we can take that distance 3 times across, which it looks to me about 2.5, but let's say 3 times, so that's 650 miles times 3. So now we're looking at 2,000 miles at the most that this ball is showing in diameter, yet the diameter of the Earth is 8,000 miles. So they're showing you right here a ball 4 times as small as the Earth. And when you see this, this needs to scream out to you that there's a problem here. The problem is that the camera lens is pulling the edges in and showing you a ball. Why would anybody need to do that? When you show somebody reality, you show them reality. You don't need to bring things in. You don't need to use a certain lens to make people think that they're seeing a globe. And the thing is, if you bent this out like we would normally see it, and you could just tell that this is a bent image. The way that the clouds curve around on the lower right there, and the way that they're curving at the top left or around 11 o'clock, this has been clearly bent in. You can see it with the stupid space shuttle or whatever this thing is here. That it is bent in. I absolutely believe, because, and I'll tell you the reason why, I absolutely believe this is a real image. I do not think that this is a fake image. The reason I say that is because if you're going to fake it, you would just fake it. You would not need to manipulate your fake. So this is a real image manipulated by its
Right, let's say that's a real image of the Earth, but the foreground, I ain't buying it. So let's just clarify that.
What do you mean? You mean the shuttle?
Well, yeah, I don't believe that's taken from the shuttle up there because I don't believe it exists. But the Earth, I believe, could very well be a real image.
Well, the thing is, if it were a fake, let's say the shuttle piece, and I don't mean it's the shuttle, but let's say these pieces of metal here, whatever they are, if you were going to fake it, you would just put it there without the curvature, in my opinion. I don't. Right. You wouldn't. The way it's bent tells me that whatever that is there. Now it could just be a high altitude plane that's got junk on it. I mean, I don't know. It doesn't matter whether it's real or not. But the whole thing is, this is a manipulated image. And again, if you're showing somebody reality, there's no reason to manipulate it. This is clearly, that's just like I said, the Caribbean down there, the Bahamas, 650 miles. So when this happens, we need to be smart enough to realize the globe is much larger than that. I mean, I said 4 times. That's very, very generous. I was, rounding up in every way, giving it to the globe. It's probably 5 or 6 times smaller than the globe is. So when we see that, we need to recognize that they're fooling us. That they're trying to make you see this and say, oh, look at that, the blue marble that we live on, and it's just not reality. Reality is that piece of land is stretched out and bent, and that's what I think they're doing. I think they're flying high altitude planes above the Earth, taking images, bending them with a GoPro lens, and telling you that you live on a ball. And it's just ridiculous. The Earth doesn't spin. The plane flies above the Earth. That's why you get the perception of a spinning Earth. It's just the vehicle moving, not the Earth. The Earth is a flattened stationary plane. It's a flat Earth. Oh, by the way, if anybody wanted to know how to spell the dog's name is Steffi, and it's S-T-F-E for stationary flat Earth.
Excellent. Okay. So, I was spelling it S-T-E-F and then capital F-E behind it, so I guess I had it wrong, but close.
T-F-E.
Okay. And, as far as this picture you got here, Jaron, all I can say is photo or painting. Where the hell is Matt Powerland when you need him? So anyway, okay, well, cool. Yeah, and I've noticed some people in the chat saying no, the wide-angle lens is used to basically be able to show you more of the land area, not to prove that the globe is a sphere. It's like, yeah, you say that, Sly, but that is not the intention of NASA. NASA's intention is to make it appear that it is a ball Earth. Nothing more.
How is that showing more of the land area if it's showing a small section of land taking up the whole globe?
Also, my sister just showed me her new iPhone, and it's got this mode for the camera where you can take a panoramic photograph and then show much wider than you've actually than the actual lens would capture by basically recording as you move it round. So Sly Sparkane, you're a fraud. That's what NASA would be doing if they wanted to show what's actually there. So you're just talking gibberish like you did with your globe nonsense.
Yeah, just take a video and spin around. I mean, look at this perception here. Now remember that why wouldn't they just lower the camera over the side and take a picture of the whole globe? I mean, it just makes no sense. It's complete nonsense that we've even bought into it this long.
Yeah, they tell us they can't do that because they can't get far enough away from the Earth. It's like, yeah, okay, then why not take it from the moon or from a million miles away in one of the satellites, or it's like
Mars finding water right now.
Yeah, I mean, it's so retarded. And even the moon, what was it, the picture that was taken that showed the moon traversing the globe from the satellite that was allegedly 1,000,000 miles out, that was fraud beyond belief.
The Discovery.
Yeah. So even then, you have the globe Earth, but unfortunately, and even though it's covering a period of 6 to 8 hours, something like that, you thick with the Earth, and not only that, at the rate that the moon's going, it looks like it's going, it's going at an absolute gangbuster speed, much faster than they tell us that it's going. So they can't even keep up with their own lies.
I actually did the math on that, Bob, because I was going to make a video about it, and when you actually put out the moon as far away from the Earth as it supposedly is supposed to be, which is ridiculous, it actually kind of made sense. It did work out mathematically. But here was the problem, is if you take a look at that image and you kind of picture it, because I don't have anything to show you right now, but as the moon's going across the Earth and they say, oh, you can see the backside of the moon, why is the moon dark? It's facing the sun. It should look like the full moon. There's no reason why it should be dark. It's ridiculous. And again, I never look for NASA to make math mistakes. If they're going to get one thing right, it's going to be the mathematics of it. But that's it. That's all they can get right. They're not going to get the rest right. So that's what you have to look at.
Well, yeah. But not only did NASA get the math wrong, but so did JAXA. In both of the pictures that we got from JAXA and NASA showing Earthrise from the moon, because they totally screwed up the math there, because, again, they showed the Earth rising from the moon as if it was the same size as the moon is from the Earth. Well, the Earth is supposed to be 4 times larger than the moon, so the Earth should have been absolutely huge in that panoramic scene on both JAXA and NASA, and yet they both made the Earth actually look considerably smaller than the moon does from the Earth. They totally boned it up there.
Let's give NASA credit, though, because they actually showed the Earth rise during an orbit, whereas JAXA showed it from their lander that was on the moon, in which case there is no such thing as a Earth rise.
Exactly.
Earth can't rise.
Exactly. And that's another good point. I mean, there are so many, literally, we could talk about it all day long and never even come close to addressing all of the mistakes that are made. And they wouldn't be making all these mistakes if this was real.
Right.
But
remember
it's
we
not.
The other night, Bob, we were saying that when you tell the truth, you have at least that to go off of, that you're always telling the truth and there's nothing that's going to come back and bite you. When you're telling massive fraudulent lies, it's got to be weighing on you constantly, because you'll never be able to provide evidence. And this is what I've gone over 1,000 times, is NASA goes as far as they can without giving you proof, because there is no proof of that which isn't true. So all you have to do is think to yourself all the things that would prove to you everything that they're saying. And I don't mean because your teacher told you, and I don't mean because Neil deGrasse told you. I mean proof, as in a 24-hour camera that everyone could watch from the ISS as it went across the Earth, 17,500 miles per hour. We'd be able to match the cloud patterns. We'd be able to prove it to ourselves that that was true. If there was an astronaut that wore a helmet cam as he got into the space shuttle, as they shut the doors, as the space shuttle took off, and as he got to space, and we got to see all that from a helmet cam, we don't see any of that. There's a reason. Why don't we see pictures of the equipment that landed on the moon? It would be very easy to send a lander, be cheap as could be, I'm guessing. Send that, with $22 billion budget, believe me, it would be important for them to take $1 billion and send a lander to go take a few images so that they can get everybody off their back about not going to the moon. Think about that. You're a scientific organization that is getting accused daily on website after website, on movie after movie, of being a fraud, of being a hoax, that you did not go and do the greatest thing that any human being has ever done. People are accusing you of that, and you refuse to just prove it? Believe me, I would prove it in a heartbeat. I would think that's the most important thing to do, is to make sure that the people that are out there calling me a fraud are proven wrong, so that there's no more questions. They don't do that. They don't take a lander and go show you. They take a LRO, the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter, fly it 50 miles above and show you little pixel changes and say, see, that's where the flag is. That's the flag's shadow. And that's the closest we can get, even though we've got telescopes that look 100 billion light years into the distance. We can't look at the equipment that's still on the moon. That would be proof. Why have we never seen an eclipse of the Earth? An eclipse of the sun by the Earth from the moon? Send a camera there, turn it around, and let us watch it. They won't do it because those kind of things would prove reality, but they're not talking about reality. It's all pretend. So that's you just start looking for the things. What is proof? You need proof, not just little conjecture, not because they've got a preponderance of evidence. Sure, they may have a preponderance of things that if somebody looks at it and says, I can't believe all these manuals they have, all these plans, they got the orbiter plans, they've got a ton of stuff because that's what you have to do to convince people is just keep piling on the shit. That's why they keep coming out with spacewalks. That's why they keep coming out with more trips to the who knows where and which comet they're going to go land on, and it's all because they want you to see so much that you go, well, they couldn't possibly be lying, but they are.
Yep.
Yes,
absolutely true. And it's amazing that they use the very same techniques that we're criticized for, or terms like preponderance of evidence, which basically is just a cumulative amount of evidence that is pointing towards a certain conclusion. It doesn't necessarily have to be conclusive in and of itself. However, it's a very good supporting factor. For example, if you are talking about a flat Earth versus a globe, and you have essentially done everything that can be done to disprove the globe. And by the way, that's something also that I want to mention today, that we are making these proofs. When we present these proofs, we are making them assuming that everybody already understands that the motion of the Earth has been disproved thoroughly by a multitude of ways, not to mention a lot of scientific experiments that have gone on in the past, the Michelson-Morley, the Michelson-Gale experiment, the Sagnac experiment, Airy's failure, the idea that they're seeing constellations are always there for millennia. All of these things disprove a moving globe, that we're in motion altogether. And we have covered this before, and we will continue in the future covering them, because it's something that needs to be repeated over and over and over again for people to understand. The Earth is not only not moving, but it is flat, and those proofs are still coming. But in the meantime, there's a few other things that we definitely need to cover, because amazingly, we've already gone an hour and a half into this show. Unreal.
Well, and just so everybody knows, the reason none of those experiments matter now is because somebody came along and said relativity, and all that is a cop-out. That's what it is. It means nothing. Relativity means if you had a two-body system, so let's say the Earth and the Moon are the only bodies in the entire universe, that you can never tell which one is actually moving. It's relative. Whether you're on the Earth, you could say the Moon's moving, or on the Moon, you could say the Earth's moving. So then when you multiply that out and you put another 100 billion or 100 sextillion stars, whatever they want to say, when you put that out there, then you have to realize that it doesn't matter what's happening. That's basically what they did with relativity. They just said, doesn't matter. It's like me saying I'm as tall as I am. It's as me saying I weigh as much as I weigh. That's what relativity is. It doesn't matter. It's self-relativistic. There is nothing there. It's a way of describing away everything because you just say it's all relative. If that's the case, then there is no speed. There's no such thing as speed because we could be flying 66,000 miles per hour or the sun's moving 66,000 miles per hour. It doesn't matter. Yet they'll take relativity, use it when they want, but then say the Earth is traveling around the sun. If you say that, then you don't understand relativity. You don't get it.
Right.
Relativity says there is no fact there. So make up your mind.
Right, and I say, who the hell cares what Einstein's first wife thinks? That's what I say, because it was Einstein's first wife that wrote the theory of relativity, not Einstein. And of course, they don't credit her for that because they're not, she wasn't the Wonder Girl or whatever. But Einstein's theory, not only did he not write it, but it was totally wrong in every way, shape, and form. Not only general relativity, but special relativity as well. And this is a subject that's been raging on for quite some time. And I would dare say that a relatively high percentage of physicists out there are also adopting the point of view that Einstein and everything he ever said was nonsense. It just doesn't add up. Einstein was probably the worst example you could ever point to. of any of the physicists. And of course, when we're talking about the theory of relativity, we are talking about Einstein's first wife, not Einstein, and who gives a crap what she says. So there you have that.
Mm. There's an Australian theoretical physicist who's got a series of videos on YouTube. I forget his name right now, but he demolishes relativity, and he's really good at explaining all the terms, the terminology, the functions of the various different symbols. It's brilliant. If you ever want to watch something and really get the grip of how to deconstruct and demolish the whole relativity, watch his videos. I'll see if I can find a link later and pass it to you guys.
The only thing to me is, if you're talking about a theoretical physicist, then you could be talking about a surgeon of in people who are injured in dreams. It's the same thing. What is a theoretical physicist? We already have physicalness here. We don't need theory of the physical. It'd be like a doctor who's out there working on people in dreams. Like, big deal. What are you doing? It doesn't matter. It's nonsense.
Yeah, this guy comes from an engineering background, so it's more practical, but he understands it and breaks it down. It's brilliant. It's really good, especially when he points out that things like big G, the gravitational constant, isn't actually constant, which Rupert Sheldrake exposed in the TED talk. It falls down at every opportunity that it can. It's almost as if it was made to fail.
Yeah, Rupert Sheldrake, awesome PhD, believes in the 100th monkey effect because they've proven it in experiment after experiment. Yeah,
and he also exposed that the speed of light is not constant and big G is not constant. So it's like the whole thing is unraveling for the theorists out there.
Yep.
I saw it described as somebody was talking about calling these scientists from now on voodoo scientists, and I like the term, because what he's saying is anybody who has to explain something to you in terms and numbers and math that you don't understand is, if they're making money from it, if they're doing things, then they are simply stealing from you. And that's what these physicists have learned to do. That's what Neil deGrasse has learned to do. That's what Lawrence Krauss has learned to do. They've just learned to confuse you with big words and with big numbers and astronomical units that can't possibly be measured or seen, and then they get to live in their little cush jobs, and then what are they protected by? The ultimate of all time is in regards of conflict of interest, which is better known as peer review. It's called conflict of interest. It's called the same people who are getting funding, who are the ones whose current beliefs are at stake, who are reading papers of whether or not they're going to accept the next proof. When, if I'm reading a paper and I've had my theory for 6 years, it's been the top theory, and they say, oh, scientists like to be wrong. Yeah, right. Are they human beings? Okay, then they don't like to be wrong. They don't want to be told that for 8 years they've been working on bullshit. So they reject things that would ever change the direction we're going. And when they're given money under the table by people who own oil companies, then they simply would never let anything come to light that would do away with our need for petroleum.
Yep, very true. Very true. So one other thing that I kind of wanted to bring up here also, and this is what the image I have up on the screen right now. The first time I came across this image was in a delegate class for Nassim Haramein and the Resonance Project, which I've been involved with actively for, well, about a decade now. But anyway, so the first time I saw this, it occurred to me, it's like, oh my God. And of course, I was not a flat earther at this point, but this seemed so much more logical to me when we are looking at the motion of the solar system than the standard, sun in the middle and all the planets just going around it in a simple horizontal plane. And the reason for that is because, as we know, the Earth may be spinning 1,040 miles an hour and then traveling at 67,000 miles an hour around the sun. But the sun is also blasting through space at, what is it, 500,000 miles an hour or 600,000 miles an hour, something like that?
Yeah.
A ridiculous amount of speed. And of course, and then beyond that, then we've got our solar system going around the Milky Way at another order of ridiculous speed, which I believe surpasses even the speed of light. But they say that
2.2 million, I think, is the galaxies moving.
Right. Okay. So anyway, all of these things are a whole different way to look at it. And so let's just assume for a minute that we were on a spherical Earth and that this model that we're seeing is actually the way it's happening. The sun blazing through space at its speed, and we're all rotating around it. So when you look at it from this angle, what this means is that the planets would necessarily have to be speeding up to actually overtake the sun and come around the front side of it, and then slowing down by a corresponding amount as they go behind it. Now, this would represent a very, very substantial change in speed.
Yeah.
And I mean,
a change in view, like where the North Star is, it would be nowhere near.
And angular momentum too.
Everything about it. That's absolutely right. And for people to again think that we would not feel that difference in motion, that's preposterous. I mean, it's preposterous that we don't feel it with a rim velocity of over 1,000 miles an hour. It is also preposterous that we wouldn't feel it with a change in speed of several thousand miles an hour going ahead of the sun and behind the sun and ahead of the sun and behind the sun. And remember, if the sun is going 500,000 miles an hour forward, guess what? That means that all the other planets are too, right? So it's not just the 67,000 mile an hour rotation around the sun. It's not just a 1,000 mile an hour turn, but it's also a forward velocity that the planet Earth would be traveling with the solar system of over 500,000 miles an hour.
And not only that, but sorry, Bob. Not only that, but the sun traveling at that speed, being this fiery plasma, whatever they now say it is, it means that in the northern hemisphere, the sun would be resting. It would be like a match, it would be resting on a column of light, the trail that it would be leaving. And that's in the northern hemisphere. In the southern hemisphere, you'd have the sun with a trail of light going from the top of the sun up somewhere, who knows where. It would have a comet trail. Then it doesn't have a comet trail.
Yeah.
And if you look at if you don't think the Rosicrucians knew that the Earth was flat, ask yourself why the Georgia Guidestones say right on the side of the Georgia Guidestones that they drilled a hole so you can always see the pole star. Not the poles stars, but the pole star. And you wouldn't drill a hole for somebody to see something for 300 years when by then it will have moved on and there'll be another pole star. They're proving to you, showing to you that the pole star remains in the same spot for all time, not for 1,000 years or 2,000 or 3,000, whatever cosmology wants to say today. They know for a fact that pole star doesn't move. Does it move slightly? Yeah, it moves click, 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 3 or 4 clicks forward, then it moves back. Exactly where it was, always in that same drilled out circle on the Georgia Guidestones.
Right. They tell us after so many thousands of years, then Vega will be the new pole star, right? Which it's nonsense. You've gone through Stellarium, I've gone through my Starry Night software, and I've incremented it, 100 years into the future, 1,000 years into the future, 5,000 years into the future. Guess what? It always stays the same. So even our softwares, which are computer precision softwares that are tracking the motions of all this, seem to disagree with mainstream science in the astronomy department. I wonder why.
Yes.
So anyway, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to run down a really quick list of other flat Earth / non-ball Earth evidence that I just wanted to throw out there, and then I'm going to let Antonio present his evidence, and then Jaron, I know you might have some other stuff or not, and then I will get to my top 3 proofs, and we will discuss those in depth. But so here's a few of the things that I've got that are not necessarily conclusive, although one could consider some of these things as conclusive, but I'm not going to call them conclusive, but I think that they are good proofs for a preponderance of evidence. And that would be, so other flat Earth evidence I have, I said the multitudes of landmarks documented in Eric Dubé's 200 proofs Earth is not a spinning ball that have all been observed from distances that should have made viewing impossible because of the Earth's alleged curvature. Now, when I talk about that, I talk about specific landmarks like the Statue of Liberty, which is able to be able to be seen from 80 miles away, or cities across the Great Lakes that should not be able to be there. They should be hidden by massive amounts of curvature. The fact that you can see Oahu from Kauai on specific clear days when you should not be able to see any of it. There are literally hundreds of those examples that we can give. Okay, so that's one thing. Another thing is
Hold on,
is
just
that
on that one real quick, and then
okay.
because I know what people are going to jump on that and say, they're going to say that's because of refraction that light bends and you're seeing light bend. But why don't we get to use refraction when you tell us Eratosthenes measured the sun light coming through? It was parallel lines, and the sticks had different shadows. What happened to bending light then? Oh, in that case, there is no bending light. In that case, the light comes through straight, perfectly parallel, because you need it in order for your ball.
Yep, exactly. And of course refraction is going to come into it, but the thing is it would be refracting down in both directions. If you were to look across at Toronto from one side of the lake and see Toronto and then go to the Toronto side and look back, well, that means that light would have to be refracting in both directions downwards. Mm-hmm. And again, that doesn't make any sense either, right? So, and not only that, if they want to go to the mirage, well, mirages are typically caused by thermal inversions, which typically give an appearance of an upside down image, not a perfectly clear, in focus, right side up, pristine image. So, anyway. So, okay, so next thing I had is I said that surveyors, engineers, and architects never factor in Earth curvature to their projects. Not for canals, not for tunnels, not for bridges. They are never plotted taking the Earth's curvature into consideration. Now, the rebuttal to that is going to be, oh yes sir, the Golden Gate Bridge, they allowed 1 inch of back curvature for the Golden Gate Bridge, which is just silly and nonsense if you think about it, but whatever, we'll give you that. But you look at structures like Lake Pontchartrain or any of the large lakes or any structures over large lakes, they don't take that into consideration, the curvature of the Earth. The only place that ever comes into play is when you're looking at geodesy, and geodesy is nothing more than regular surveying that's done built upon a hypothetical mathematical sphere, and that's it. Okay?
Right, like a mile to 1 degree of arc. It's like that's the mathematical answer to that. It doesn't mean it's reality. And again, you have to remember what a deception is. If somebody's trying to fool you, because people will come and say that about the Golden Gate Bridge, and you're saying, oh, it would have been, you're right. It's impossible for them just to say that they had to allow for 1 inch of curvature. Where's the proof of that? Just because people say so? No way.
Exactly. So another thing would be solar hotspots on clouds, proving, of course, the sun's proximity to the Earth, and crepuscular rays, sun shadows on and sun shadows on the ground from objects from high altitude. And when I say that, not only can you see hot spots on the clouds in some of the balloon footage that's directly below it, but even more interesting, there is footage out there, and I think it was right at the beginning of the crow video, the scarecrow video, was actually showing the picture where the sun was lighting up objects on the grounds like mountains in about a 120-degree area, and you can see the shadows of all of these objects pointing in different directions, with respect to each other. Now, if the sun was truly 93 million miles away, that would never happen because all of the rays would be coming in at a perfect 90-degree angle. But with the sun being 3,000 miles up and much closer, then you're going to get differences in shadows on land features. And again, that's something that's right at the beginning of the crow video, and I'll have to find a link with it somewhere else. But I think we all know, what I'm talking about when I talk about that. That also, to me, absolutely disproves a ball Earth, okay, and also a flat Earth, if you want to look at it that way. So another thing, the imbalance of climates in the alleged north and south hemispheres. The two hemispheres, climate-wise, don't even remotely resemble each other. In the north, we have nice spring times where vegetation, happens, and we have quite a variety of wildlife, and it's so much different at the extreme northern latitudes than you get when you go to the extreme southern latitudes. I shouldn't even have to go into this specifically. The bottom line is everybody knows that the climates at the northern hemisphere in the Arctic Circle specifically are far different than they are in the Antarctic Circle in the southern hemisphere. That to me, if we're dealing with a spinning Earth, ball Earth, and a sun 93 million miles away, is simply impossible for that to happen. Any comments?
No, definitely.
No?
If anybody has questions on that, Eric Dubé has the best video where he describes the amount of species that are living below 60 degrees in the south and the amount that are living above 60 degrees in the north. It should be close. It should be somewhat close. It's completely, it's astronomical the amount of differences. There's thousands of species living above 60 degrees and 10 living below.
Yeah, also Lloyd Pye, who passed away a couple of years ago, has some really interesting observations about the climate around the world. He wasn't a flat earther, but he just made some very good observations. So anybody out there, look for Lloyd Pye and just marvel at his information.
Yep, exactly. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm just looking at the comments, and there's a guy, Requiem for a Dream, who's one of our favorite shills, is arguing something that I'm about to blow to hell here shortly.
Brilliant.
So I'm just laughing at him. Yeah, argue away, buddy. Argue away. Anyway, okay. So next item on my list is my Nikon Coolpix P900. Why do I say that? Because of the zooming capabilities that it gives me. It gives me the capability to zoom far beyond any horizon distance that would allegedly be covered by the curvature. There are literally thousands of people now that have bought the camera, are doing experiments. Let me reduce this to maybe hundreds for John LeBon's out there. There's many people that have bought this camera. For the very reason that it set a world record zooming, the same reason I bought it is so that we could see beyond this alleged curvature, and we do, as a matter of routine. So that's just something I threw on the list. Okay, next thing is, I wrote down, they tell us that the Earth's south magnetic pole is at about 68 degrees south, which means that at any latitude below 68 degrees south, a compass will point at south while indicating north. Okay, I'll let you think about that for a second. But essentially what that means is that if the South Pole is at 68 degrees south, anybody that would be in the Antarctic Circle or further south than that, now first of all, this gets a little confusing because of what they've done to us with North and South Pole versus North and South magnetic poles. The primary thing that you have to understand here is that the geographic North Pole actually contains the magnetic South Pole in the heliocentric ball Earth model. Okay, and the South Pole geographically would contain the North magnetic pole. So if the North magnetic pole is actually in the south at 68 degrees south latitude, that means that if you are further south than that, what's going to happen is the compass needle on the south side is going to swing around and point at that north magnetic pole, which is really the south magnetic pole, and it's going to say that north is actually south. And if you think about that, that makes perfect sense. Does that resonate with you guys?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So that's a huge anomaly that I don't think that the ballers are quite ready to explain. So what they do is they come out and they say, well, we have this thing called the South Atlantic anomaly, which ironically is pretty close to that 67 degrees south, I believe. And they say that that's caused by the Van Allen radiation belts actually dipping down and touching the Earth. which of course is another load of BS and nonsense, but we'll just continue to move on. Okay, so theodolites. Theodolites are a calibrated precision instrument used in surveying, which have never measured any curvature across water. And of course, as I said earlier, even if the Earth was a ball, you would never measure any curvature across the horizon because it would be falling away from you equidistantly at a 360-degree circle, no exceptions, okay? So, people say, oh yeah, well, theodolites can measure it. It's like, no, they can't and they won't. And even if we were on a ball Earth, they wouldn't. So, that whole argument is just completely out the window. All right, so another thing I want to talk about that I think is a pretty major thing that's dramatically overlooked is the thermosphere. Okay, we are told that the ISS is whipping around in the thermosphere about 240, 250 miles up at a speed of 17,500 miles an hour. And, we've asked the questions, well, why is it then if the ISS is whipping around at that speed up there, has it not melted into a blob of molten bullshit? Well, the reason that it hasn't melted into a blob of molten bullshit, NASA tells us, is because the air molecules are so sparse at that altitude that they simply cannot get excited enough to cause any heating that would affect the ISS. Okay, that's great, whatever. So let's assume that's true. But the problem is the reason that they say that the thermosphere is actually at that 2,500 Celsius or 4,500 degree Fahrenheit temperature is because of the intense, extreme solar radiation that is exciting those would-be air molecules that would be there. Well, that's fine. Okay, so the air molecules aren't there, but riddle me this. The sun, if it's coming from the sun, and the sun is emitting far more than just visible light. The sun emits visible light. The sun emits RF. It emits X-ray, UV, infrared, gamma rays. Okay, all of these are extremely high intensity radiations that, at least here on Earth, in order to block them, X-rays or whatever, we know that you have to have lead shielding, about 3 feet thick in order to protect you from, the radiation of like X-rays. When you go to the dentist's office, they have to throw a lead apron over the front of you just to take a 10 millisecond X-ray, okay, whatever. So my point is that human tissue, unfortunately, will be excited in much the same way that air molecules would be by all this barrage of radiation. Like I said, from RF to infrared to ultraviolet to X-ray to gamma ray, all of these at extremely high radiation with nothing more than the thin aluminum walls of the ISS to protect them. Well, I got news for you. That barrage of radiation to the people in the alleged ISS is intense enough that it would be akin to sticking somebody inside a high-powered microwave oven and turning it on high. If you didn't just go up like a flash cube, you'd be dead almost instantly. So that's something that is a huge problem for the ball earthers and the believers in the ISS, where NASA themselves says that the radiation is so intense up there that these are what gives the excitement to the few air molecules in the thermosphere that would actually excite them to a temperature of 4,500 degrees Fahrenheit. And to think that that would have no effect with no shielding on a human being is beyond ludicrous to the nth degree.
Also, the static charge accumulated because it's not grounded, it can't ground itself. That would have implications all of its own, just the static electrical charge.
Yes, and that's a whole other issue altogether, which leads us, back to this lie. It's just another proof. Okay, so all right. So I think what else do I have? Oh yeah, let's make another one more thing before you go into this. The deal with gravity, and this is just something that I was thinking about as to what gravity actually is. And I've made the assertion before, as have many engineers and physicists and whatnot, that Gravity is a product of electromagnetic energy. I believe this unequivocally. There are many scientists and engineers that absolutely agree with this 100%. Many more that believe that the universe is indeed an electrical entity and gravity has nothing, no role whatsoever to play in it. But the very thing that we are perceiving as gravity is actually an electromagnetic effect, and I'm going to try and give a little bit of an explanation as to how that works. So I'm going to read what I wrote down here, and then I'm going to try and explain it a little bit more in depth. So here's what I wrote. Charged particles in a magnetic field react at 90 degrees from the dielectric inertial plane, much the same as a gyroscope reacts at 90 degrees from its rotational plane. Since everything in existence is made from charged particles, then everything in existence will be affected by this 90-degree magnetogyroscopic field we mistakenly call gravity. It is also the field that literally determines up from down. Gravity, coincidentally, just happens to obey the very same inverse square law as all electromagnetic waves do and must obey, proving beyond any doubt that so-called gravity is nothing more than a well-known electromagnetic wave effect. Electricity is the only force in the universe. Okay, so I'm going to go beyond that, and I'm going to talk a little bit about spin. Okay, now spin appears to negate gravity, and we know that by taking a gyroscope, and when you spin it up, it's funny, but you've seen the videos where people can take a spinning object that's really heavy and they can lift it up literally with one finger, because the anti-gravitic field or effects of a gyro actually do tend to negate gravity, okay, or what we're perceiving as gravity, but it's not really negating gravity. So when you spin an object, its magnetic field generated via its atomic charge becomes a closer relative motion and more resonance to either the centripetal or the centrifugal lines of force from the plane itself, which then negates or attenuates the downward magnetogyroscopic pressure we are misinterpreting as gravity. Now, what that means is this. It means simply that when you spin an object, the faster you spin it, the more it tends to negate the forces of gravity. Okay? There is an example, and actually let me bring this up. There's a guy named Bruce De Palma, okay? And Bruce De Palma did this amazing experiment called the spinning ball experiment. And essentially what it was, and I'll just kind of give you a little overview of it, is that when you spin a ball, and I think in this particular experiment, he took a ball and he spinned it up to, I don't know, 20,000 RPM or something like that. 20 or 30, or 27,000 RPM, I'm sorry. Here it is right here in the chart. And then he launched it up in the air with a calibrated mechanism that, you know, would apply the same force vertically every single time. So he did it, he launched a ball that wasn't spinning, okay, and that ball took a curved parabolic path, okay, and then fell back down. Then he took the very same ball and he spun it up to 27,000 RPM, and what he noticed is that the ball took a higher trajectory, it went up faster, went higher, and came down slower, all because it was spinning. Okay, now that alone annihilates Newtonian physics, Newtonian laws of gravity, the De Palma spinning ball experiment, but it really shouldn't be any surprise considering the evidence that we've seen from gyroscopes, and gyroscopes having this ability to negate gravity. So what I'm saying is that this gravitic field that we're perceiving, that's actually an electromagnetic field, is the dielectric inertial plane of the magnetic field that is here on the Earth. And when I say that, if you picture the Earth as a disk, okay, the dielectric inertial plane or the magnetic field is spinning along the surface of the flat Earth, okay, which means that it will have a torsional effect of 90 degrees to that. Just like when you take a gyroscope and you poke it like on the top what will happen is it will react 90 degrees away from that area that you poked it at, because that's where the force is transferred. It's actually transferred 90 degrees away from the point of the gyroscope that you're actually touching. Okay, the same thing happens with the centripetal, the dielectric inertial plane of the magnetic flat Earth. Okay, it is spinning, and it has this 90-degree force that's pushing down, that is literally determining up from down. It's what gives us that up from down. And I've always gone along with, I agree with the argument that gravity is really more density and buoyancy. However, I've always argued that there is still something that is determining up from down. And of course, the ballers would say, well, that's gravity, that's gravity. I'm saying that's simply the 90 degrees force that is adjacent to the dielectric inertial plane of the spinning magnetic field on flat Earth. Okay, I may be right, I may be wrong. I wanted to throw that out there, but there is no doubt in my mind that what we're perceiving as gravity is without a doubt an electromagnetic force. And
Hutchison, you've heard of is it John Hutchison?
Yeah, the Hutchison effect, yes.
Yeah, the Hutchison effect. He's levitating things with electrical impulse only. So, yeah, the gravity. Yeah, the gravity is the Newtonian, Einsteinian calculation is just false, and this guy can demonstrate it and has done for a long time, just with electricity and without actual contact. So yeah, he's melding things together. He's levitating heavy objects, soft objects, dense objects, soft, less dense, liquids. He's levitating all kinds of things.
And he's doing that with electromagnetic energy, but the same can also be done with sound energy. We can make things literally dance around with sound energy. We can make them move into specific patterns. This is where we go back into cymatics. So really, the nature of creation is an electrical one, an electromagnetic one, a vibrational one that all works with the cymatic principle to manifest reality as we are actually perceiving it today. Okay? So yeah, there's all kinds of stuff like that. So basically, those are the notes that I wanted to cover, and I'm ready at any point to do my top three. But before that, Antonio, I think I'm going to flip it over to you and have you go over some of the interesting things that you found out.
With the video, do you mean?
With your videos
the landmass?
Yep.
Okay.
I'm going to go back to this.
Well, I'm happy to go onto the video if that's okay.
Okay, I'm ready. I'm at stars, and I can either play this in the background as we're talking, or how do you want to do it?
Yeah, if you play it, I'll explain as we go along.
Okay, and you wanted me to jump ahead of this, right?
Yeah, to the end of the observatory footage.
Okay, so there we go. And you want me to slow it down?
Okay. No, just play as is. So if you can just pause it a second, I will just explain something.
Okay.
Let's see. Yeah, 1 second. So if you pause it. Okay, so we're told that the stars spin counterclockwise in the northern hemisphere and clockwise in the southern hemisphere. And we're taught this because we're on a globe and they must spin counter to each other. It looks like National Geographic and the European Space Agency disagree with this. So I'm going to show some footage that shows this. Now, for a thought experiment, if you will consider the Earth being flat and it having an umbrella above it, and the whole of the sky being under the same umbrella, and the hub of this umbrella is the North Pole, the pole star. So you hang ribbons, say 4 inches away, on the ribs of this umbrella, 4 inches away from the hub, and you also hang ribbons on the very ends of the ribs, so on the very edge of the perimeter of the umbrella. And now you spin this umbrella clockwise. What you'll see when you look up to the hub is you'll see a circle, and the ribbons are describing a circle going clockwise. And as you look to the edge of the umbrella, you'll see that the stars that are spinning at the same rate as the north and moving horizontally, not in a circle that you can see getting nearer the horizon and further away from the horizon, but literally horizontally. So let's see if the real world shows this or whether it's just my imagination.
Okay.
So hit play.
Okay, it's playing. I think I should slow this down a little bit. Let me go to half speed.
Let's see. So, oh, you need to jump ahead. I think this is still the observatory footage.
Okay. Oh, there we go.
I'm uploading this video for everybody to be able to view. So you see, the stars are moving ahead a bit more. This is still observatory.
Okay, a little bit more.
Yeah, we're near the end now.
Okay.
Okay, so this is National Geographic. Stars are moving. We're looking now. We're looking at a clock, if you will, and we're looking. Anytime we see the horizon, we're looking towards the bottom of the clock, towards say 6 o'clock, and the stars are moving, as you see, right to left in a circle, in a smiley face. This is National Geographic footage of the Aurora Borealis, and these stars are describing a circle. And this is Russia.
This is taken from where?
This is taken from different latitudes north. Some similar to the latitude south. Some of the stations that we'll see from the ESA. So 70 degrees north, 73 degrees north from Norway and from Alaska.
Okay.
Yeah. So these again going clockwise, right to left. You can jump ahead a little bit if you want.
Okay. I could turn it up to full speed too, I suppose.
Yeah. Now this is the Aurora Australis. So this is the opposite. This is in the southern. This is in Antarctica. And as you see, the stars are moving. You'll see it more clearly. Right to left.
Right to left, yes,
Not
they are.
Yeah, not in a smiley face. They're not describing a circle. They're literally going right to left. Now, different orientations in the south will describe a line that goes slightly down to the left or slightly up to the left, but right to left, same as in the northern hemisphere. So, same as when we were looking north, now we're looking south. It's following the same umbrella pattern. No pole rotation, no star trails like we've all been shown. So, again, a different station in Antarctica.
Okay, now one thing I will say, Antonio, I'm looking at it on my feed as I'm playing it here, and I'm looking at the live feed. And I apologize to everyone out there, but you cannot see the stars anywhere near the resolution that I have playing this. However, Antonio will be making this video publicly available to everyone, so you can get a lot better resolution.
Yes, if anybody wants to watch this video, just switch your lights off. You'll see it much clearer. So again, right to left, right to left. These are going horizontal. Look at the horizon. Look at the stars at the horizon. They're going right to left. They're not describing a circle or a portion of a circle like they did in the north. Same again.
So that's very interesting, because typically footage from Antarctica we would be expecting to see curling up in a ball.
Yeah.
Like John LeBon is giving us endless times.
Absolutely. And that's because, they have to prop up the model. They can't just show the real world, and say, but pretend it's doing a curve. So they show us curves. Now, the way I found this was by looking at countless star trails and time lapses of the stars, all of them showing curves, and then suddenly having the idea to look for the Aurora Borealis and the Aurora Australis. And lo and behold, all of this footage is of the auroras. And on this footage is where you see the stars moving as they do in the real world.
bring
So
want to bring
again,
something up about that
it's,
because a lot of people will say, well, we see so much evidence. We've seen 100 times them show them circle. So why does one thing change that? Well, the one thing that changes that is, again, you should expect to see all the deception. They're trying to deceive you. Occasionally they make a mistake. That's the same thing. I got shit for my webcam videos in the Antarctica video because everyone said, you didn't show all the videos that do show 24-hour sun. And I say, well, that's the going belief. Of course you're going to see videos of a 24-hour sun. That's what they're faking you with. The problem is there is a couple videos that show them editing it, and that's the proof that you need, that if it's reality, you don't need to edit it. You don't need to cut out the periods of time. Same thing here, is that they just made a mistake and left some stars to do what they really do.
Yeah, you can jump ahead. I'm looking at the sun going across, actually the moon. You can jump ahead this one. It's oriented north anyway.
All right. Say when to stop.
I'm still seeing the. Well, it doesn't matter. It'll go.
Are you looking at our feed or the live feed, Antonio?
I'm looking at the live feed. Oh, right. Sorry. Okay, so now we're looking at
because I noticed your comments were out of sync with what we were seeing.
Sorry.
So
this footage is just to verify whether or not they might use a fisheye lens. You know, I don't know. Maybe lasers do bend, you know, naturally. But as you see, again, the stars are moving horizontally, even though this is fisheye.
Oh my God! So what they're doing here is they're using a fisheye lens to make the stars appear like they're circling back up. Is that part of the illusion here? Oh, that is really a dirty trick.
Yeah. But, by the way, this kills the cell Earth, because the cell Earth describes circles. The stars in the southern, in Antarctica should be describing circles. Now, would you pause it here, please? Okay. Now, we've all seen footage of the stars in the north going counterclockwise. Okay? Now, this is footage of the aurora borealis showing counterclockwise motion. But let's see what happens, okay? Play.
Okay, I'm running it at half speed too.
Okay, so you see the stars there through the doorway moving counterclockwise. And here, counterclockwise.
Yes, and they are not spinning around any point whatsoever, not even so you can notice it.
Yeah, but still counterclockwise. Okay, so we're going to look to see how this can happen. You've got National Geographic showing the northern stars going clockwise, and then this footage going anti-clockwise. So maybe there's some way of determining whether this footage has been played with or not. And you know, paying close attention, I noticed that there is actually something that tells us this footage has been reversed, and we'll see that in a minute. I mean, unless cars travel backwards at high speed and planes fly backwards.
Right. So let's give them a little precursor of what they're going to be seeing.
Okay.
I'll go ahead and let you say it, Antonio.
Oh, okay. You can say it if you want, Bob. But
all right. So here's what's going on, guys. Is what Antonio is going to be showing is that in an effort to fake some of these videos, what Antonio discovered is that sometimes they are playing the film backwards. And the evidence for that is you can see the cars going backwards and the planes flying backwards. And it's pretty obvious. Why would they ever do this if they were just legitimately trying to make a point? And the reason is because they're trying to deceive. And a lot of this footage that is being released from the South Pole, and what we are saying point blank, is a lot of it is absolutely faked. That's what we're saying, straight up. So here you have footage.
The thing is, or from the North Pole. So this is looking north, and this footage has been reversed. So now I have reversed and slowed it, and you will see that the red lights of the car travel as you would expect, you know, into the distance rather than coming towards you.
We're looking north here then. And so what they're doing, we're looking north, and they've reversed it so that the star rotation will match what we would expect to see in the southern hemisphere. But it's not. But
Yes.
because of the fact we're looking at the northern hemisphere, and we know for a fact that all the stars are rotating around Polaris. So what they're doing is they're taking northern hemisphere footage here and running it backwards and telling us it's coming from the South Pole.
Yeah, it's to match the globe model. The globe model says they spin differently depending on hemisphere. The reality is we're not on two different hemispheres. We're on one flat plane, and they rotate in according to, you know, each other. So this footage is showing that when the stars are moving clockwise, so right to left, the vehicles are traveling as you'd expect. Same here. I will slow this down and then I will reverse it too. You see how the stars are moving counterclockwise, and that car that you see going by is traveling backwards.
It sure is.
Okay, and now you will see also another car. Now it has been reversed, and you see the car traveling forwards and the stars moving clockwise. So when the cars are traveling forwards, the stars are moving clockwise. When the cars are speeding in reverse, the stars move counterclockwise. This is how the footage of opposite spins is played to us. They just reverse the footage. And here, if we go to the horizon, to the right corner of the horizon on the corner here, you see. Sorry, if you can just play that last segment again. It's the same thing. It's a north. So that area, there's a plane flying backwards there. When I reverse the footage, you can see that it's a plane actually coming towards you.
Okay, I just reduced it to quarter speed.
Okay. It's in that area. Can you see that little, what looks like a star on the horizon? To the right of the, so on the right, on the bit lower down, you'll see. Now you will see it coming towards you. Just a little bit from just about where your cursor is, you'll see it.
Oh, this right here.
Yeah.
I see it. Okay.
So it comes towards you. Now this is reversed. So either planes fly backwards sometimes, or they don't fly backwards. They fly forwards.
Yeah, I tried flying backwards one time. That didn't work out too well.
Yeah.
So,
So this is just demonstrating the idea that you have two poles where stars spin around is false. We have one pole where stars spin around, and the very edges of this ring magnet, the stars do a carousel around. So when Australia can see the crux scrolls around to South America, to South Africa. All of the stars scroll around because they're all part of the same display of stars over a flat world, not over a ball and not over an inverted ball, not over a cell Earth, concave Earth.
And let me try.
Sorry, concave guys.
Let me try and explain something too that hopefully people may not understand. But you have to remember too that you have to picture that you're in like a mini dome. Just imagine, and as the stars are going above you, they're going to give you the appearance of them starting to turn. But you have to remember, how many hours of starlight do we get a night or a day? In 24 hours, you have to remember that the stars don't come out till well after sunset, and the stars go away well before sunrise. So you have, let's say, 7 hours of star time in a 24-hour day. It would take 24 hours to do a circle in the sky. So when you see circular, the star trails, remember that they're only making a third of that journey in that amount of time. They're not making. It would take 24 hours to see a star go all the way around in a circle. So you have to picture, as you're looking off into the distance, that they're going to give you an appearance that they are going to start coming up, but they're not. It's just because you're in your own little bubble. Each person has their respective own little bubble, and that's why Australia will see it kind of start to come by, and they may get the appearance of star trails, and they may think that that's what they're seeing, but they're not. They're seeing 7 hours worth of stars. It's making a motion that kind of goes in that direction, and then they don't see the stars anymore. When you take a video of that and you multiply it out and put it into a program that's meant to make star trails, well, then don't be surprised when you see star trails.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. But this is it. This I was sitting, you know, Bob, you and I discussed the problem with the southern stars, and we're thinking, what the hell can be going on? That they're visible, you know, the same constellation visible from the three main continents in the south. Well, this is how they rotate around. That's it. It's as simple as that.
Exactly. And even, Antonio, even if it was true that they were circling around a point in the south, okay, we still have to remember that with the proofs given that have debunked the spinning ball Earth, okay, and with the proofs that are coming up here very shortly that I'm submitting that prove beyond any doubt whatsoever that the Earth is flat, we still cannot use the idea of the ball Earth floating out in space surrounded by stars in all directions as a model to debunk the flat Earth. What that tells us straight up is that the Earth and the sky necessarily are two separate entities, and we cannot necessarily always expect to have correlations between what we see on the ground and what we see on the sky. Now, with what you have just presented here, that pretty much brings it 100% into the general flat Earth theory that, you know, we have some sort of a spinning dome over the top of us that the stars are actually contained in, and it is commensurate with what we're seeing on Earth. However, if that wasn't true, we still cannot take the model of the universes of the heavens from the spinning ball Earth and attempt to apply it and have it make any sense for a flat Earth, or we certainly can't take it and debunk the flat Earth, because the fact is the stars are not suns that are trillions of light years away. That's just absurd.
I totally don't even agree with this footage yet, because I'm going off the basis of I need to see it for myself. I've never seen the southern stars circle, and I've never seen them not circle. So to me, this is just evidence that there's a trickery at play, and when there's trickery at play, there's a reason. It's the same thing I talked about earlier, that you don't make lies up, you don't do things in an underhanded way if you're telling the truth. It's the same thing as like circumnavigating the north-south. If the Earth was a globe, there would be several examples, numerous examples of planes simply flying north-south navigation. Now somebody will go find one obscure reference where it says somebody did it. That's not proof. You would see it constantly. You would see people flying from Australia over, and they'll say, "Oh, it's too cold for planes to fly." Yeah, right. Yeah, sure. That really happens. But we can send things up into the coldness of space. Satellites are up there giving you your direct TV signal. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And then you look at the people who have the records for north-south circumnavigation. They fly to the 90-degree mark and then turn around and go back the way they came, hit the North Pole, and then say, "I did it." And they have the record for north-south navigation, even though they did not cross Antarctica, because there's nothing to cross. And those are the kind of things you need to look at and realize something is up here. So why are they faking footage of stars in the south? Now, I'm not saying it's because they don't circle, but even if they did, I would need to see it for myself. How do we know they're not projecting the stars in the sky? I'm being serious. As much as they're doing, they're showing us fake footage of a ball from space. So I don't put it past them to just put lights up in the sky or point lights up in the sky and tell us that the stars are turning the other way. I don't put anything past them, because everything they've told us since the day I was born is pretty much bullshit.
Oh, I know. And look at the bullshit that they have, you know, come out with lately. And this may or may not be true, but I speak about the artificial sun patents that were filed in 1963 by the government. You know, that they supposedly have this technology to give us suns in the sky, which frankly I think is bullshit. If they really had that type of technology, the last place you're going to be finding it is in a Google patent page. I'm sorry, they are sloppy, but I don't think they would be that sloppy. But the point here, everyone, is with the footage that Antonio has just shown us, and also shown us that it is clearly faked in that it is trying to give us an impression by running footage of the northern stars backwards, that it's the southern pole stars that are actually revolving around a center point. Now, whether or not that's true, don't know. Whether or not any of this is true or fake, don't know. And that's the most important part of what Jaron is saying. We've got to see it for our own selves. Jaron did a video quite a while ago that was showing them clearly faking specific portions of the sun cycle in Antarctica. Why would they do that? Why would they do that? If it was all legitimate, it would be there for all to see, 24 hours, no interruptions, no cuts, no nothing. Now Antonio has just shown us some more evidence that indicate that, hey, well, maybe this curving star footage that John Laban is so hot on appears that it could be faked also. Well, I don't know. It may be, it may not be, but I do know one thing. If this was a criminal case and somebody was being tried on it, Antonio and Jaron have both introduced enough evidence to cause reasonable doubt into this model. And I hate to be using all these legal terms like preponderance of evidence and reasonable doubt, but hey, if it's good enough for the legal system, then we should maybe take a cue and at least try it out.
And then people come and say, "But you guys don't have a flat Earth map, so it can't be real." It's like, wait a second. Do you understand that something can be very real without having a map of it? What
yes.
Doesn't prove anything.
Exactly. And I will say right now that the three evidences I prove in no way support anything to do with a map. The proofs that I'm going to provide prove that the Earth is a flat plane. Now, there are some people out there, John Laban, that have come up with an idiotic video of something to the effect of 33 proofs that the Earth is not flat, okay? And in these 33 proofs, what does he do? He talks about things like the topology features, like in Colorado where we have big 14,000-foot mountains, and he calls that proof that the Earth isn't flat. And if that was the criteria for determining a flat Earth, well, John, I'd have to give it to you. But it's not.
The Earth is not a piece of paper, in case you
was
it.
That's right.
And not only that. Who was it? So, sorry, Bob. That somebody of renown said something about confusing the map for the territory. You know, and it's a good analogy. You know, you have the real world, and then you have a map, and the map might say there's a river here, but the real world says no. So the map doesn't constitute or establish the real world. It's supposed to be the other way around, but you can have the real world without any map.
Right, and people say, like, well, how come Australia is so distorted? Well, distorted according to who? Just because it was drawn a certain way before doesn't mean that now maybe it was distorted before.
Right. Well, and that in itself proves, just because of the fact that, you know, on the Gleason's flat Earth map, you know, we have Australia looking very elongated and funny, but then we also have the Mercator map and the Peters map, which clearly show the continents of largely varying size, slightly different orientation, all kinds of stuff like that. So one could easily make the argument then, well, you have an approximation, but you do not have an accurate map. Therefore, the ball Earth can't be real. You don't got a map. And then people are going to come back and say, well, yeah, but we navigate everywhere with it. And it's like, no. Yeah, you may be able to say that, but the reality is what they're really navigating from is an azimuthal equidistant map. And that's fact. That's fact.
The Pacific Ocean, maybe 1 to 3% of it is navigated by boat. That's how the shipping channels are all one very specific route. They don't even go elsewhere. That's why you hear stories of people found lost at sea for months or weeks because nobody travels there. It's just completely empty ocean. So I mean, it's not as easy. People aren't navigating out in the Southern Ocean or say off the coast of South America, just out there just navigating boats. It just doesn't happen. People may think it does, but it doesn't. It's a huge body of water. Not a lot of people boat. Yeah, there's some cruises, but you're talking about those cruises stay very close to their channels, just like people say, oh, there's cruises that go down to Antarctica. There's one spot where people park their boat and 100 people can get off at a time and go on the mainland, and then they have to get back on the boat and 100 more can get off. And there's one spot where cruises empty off at Antarctica, 100 at a time. There's a problem there. Something's up.
Yep, precisely. So Okay. All right, guys. So we are now at 2.5 hours in. So it is time, I think, to finally start disclosing Bob's top 3 proofs.
Yeah.
This is my favorite. I've been waiting for it the whole night.
Yeah, me too.
Yay!
Let me give you
All
a little intro here. This would be
Yeah. Well,
for you.
a little intro. Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome sauce. Okay. So here we go. All right. So the top 3 proofs. And these proofs, by the way, are not going to be anything that nobody hasn't heard a million times before. We are simply going to explain them and then cover the debunkings that have been going on around them and show that they are, in fact, pretty bulletproof. So, with no further ado, number 3. I'm going to go 3, 2, 1. So my number 3 top 3 reasons is that the horizon always rises to the eye level. Okay? No shocker, right? Everybody's heard that before. We have talked about this a million times. We also talked earlier about that if the horizon did not always rise to the eye level, in the case that it was actually truly a sphere, then the horizon would actually fall the higher you went up. Okay? So the fact that the horizon does always rise to eye level, whether it's at the ground or a shot taken from space, is unequivocal proof that the Earth topography is overall flat. Okay, now I'm going to bring in a video that I shot in Hawaii, and I've shown this many times before, to simply show that not only does it do it when you're standing on the shore or in an airplane or wherever you are. This particular shot that I shot was taken in Hawaii last year, and I like to use it because of the very unique perspective that it gave us. So here we are on the 7th floor of our condo building on Maui, looking to the north. Across from us we have the island of Molokai, and slightly over here to the right we have another 7-story building that's just, I don't know, maybe a couple hundred yards away to the north from us. So what we're seeing here is, as I look to the north, and I'm standing on my 7th floor balcony in Maui, looking north, and lo and behold, here we have the 7th floor of this building that's a few hundred yards downrange, and we can see the ocean coming from the base of Molokai, running straight across, and it meets absolutely perfectly with the top of the 7th floor of the building directly across from us. Thus, I can safely say that the horizon is at eye level. Okay? We know this is true if you're standing on the ground. We know this is true if you're in a small plane 3,000 feet above the ground. We know it's true if you're standing on a 14,000-foot mountain. We know this is true if you're in an airliner at 35 to 40,000 feet. We know it's true from balloon footage and rocket footage that aren't using GoPro camera lenses that go up to well over 100,000 feet. In other words, there is no distance, near or far, to the surface of the Earth that does not reveal a horizon that rises to the eye level. Now, it is a simple law of physics and a simple law of optical perspective that this is absolutely impossible on any other configuration other than an absolute flat plane. It does not work on a convex Earth. It does not work on a concave Earth. Okay? Again, this is my own footage, but this is just something that I shot because you don't very often get a perspective from the 7th floor that gives you such a beautiful marker of the horizon being at eye level here. So, essentially, you know, when I say that the horizon rises to eye level, There is no exception to that rule. There has never been an exception to that rule. There is no footage in existence that shows the horizon not rising to eye level, assuming it's been shot with a standard lens and not a fisheye or a wide-angle lens. It just simply doesn't exist. This is our proof. We have proof. Those of you that say that the horizon does not rise to eye level have no proof, because 100% of the proof unequivocally reveals that the horizon rises to eye level, period. Do you guys have anything else that you want to throw in on top of that?
Yes, I was on a plane coming back from Spain. I'm sitting next to the window, and it's a 474, I think it was. So there's the 2 seats next to me, the aisle, and then the 3 seats on the other side of the aisle. I'm on the left. I'm looking out. The horizon's to my eye level. I'm tall enough that I can see the other window across the aisle, and outside that window is also the horizon at my eye level. So how is that explained if we're on a curve? It isn't, is it? That it might reach my eye level as some kind of illusion, fine, out of my window, but not out of the other window. The other window should have shown only sky.
Yes, precisely. See, and everybody that's ever traveled in an airplane or been up on a hill or looking at a mountain, they know that that's true. If you're standing on the ground, like in San Francisco, where they're well known for their hills, and you are not quite close enough to the beginning of the hill, you can't really see down to the horizon, which would be at the bottom of the hill. Now, if you raise yourself up, then you will see the rest of that curvature go down to the ground, or the horizon will be dropping below you. So, I mean, every single day we witness this. We simply have to be aware of it. And anybody that says that they have witnessed the curvature of the Earth at any height, they have to understand that they're talking gibberish, because if you were on a ball Earth, the horizon would fall away equidistantly, 360 degrees in a circle. That doesn't happen. Therefore, proof number 3, the horizon rising to the eye level, is unequivocal, undebunkable proof that the Earth is flat. Okay?
Yes.
Let's go to number 2. And I am doing these backwards, guys. Yes, I started with 3. I'll save the best for last, because that's the one that's going to be the hottest topic. And I'm sure a lot of you already know. That's right. A lot of you are going to be having a lot to say about my number 1. All right, number 2. Water always finds its level. It is the natural physics of water to find and maintain a level surface. Great. Now, the rebuttal to this has been a plethora of nonsense, not the least of which I read the other day. Somebody was saying there is no proof whatsoever that the flat earthers have that shows the water not curving on a ball Earth. And I thought about that. It's like, that's just silly. Of course, there's no proof anywhere of water curving, so there's not going to be. So that would, by nature, say that there is an abundance of proof that water does not curve, and that's in fact what I am saying. Everywhere we look, every body of water, whether it be an ocean or a lake or the Bedford level in England, the Bedford. What is that? The Bedford Creek or whatever it is?
Canal.
It's a canal.
The Bedford Canal. Yes, the Bedford Canal. All of these have been measured, by Jaron doing some experiments, other flat earthers doing it. Parallax Robotham did the Bedford level. Every body of water on Earth, we have never been able to show any curve in it. And rather that being a strike against us, because we can't prove that the water doesn't curve everywhere, as they say, which is ridiculous. In fact, what we are proving with a mountain of evidence is that everywhere we look, water maintains its level. Okay? There are lakes in the Soviet Union that are hundreds of miles long or wide, however you want to look at it, and they routinely freeze over. Well, if they froze over, they would have rather large bulges, and I'm talking about thousands of feet to possibly miles high bulges in the center of them had they been frozen over. And yeah, I'm aware of the echo. Sorry, guys. I don't know why it's doing that, but it's gone now. Anyway, oh, and then it just came back. Well, I'll try and talk a little quieter. So maybe Jaron, I don't know, maybe you could try muting your mic just to see if that's it.
You try.
You could try it, yeah. I'm really curious why this happens. I know it happens.
On Hangout or on my mixer?
On the Hangout. Just mute your mic on the Hangout and see what happens. All right. So anyway, okay, wow, and that seems to have cured it. All right, so what I'm saying is that no one has ever produced, no baller has ever produced any footage, any evidence, any measurement, anything that shows that water curves. Now, another ridiculous rebuttal is, oh yeah, what about raindrops? Raindrops are perfect little balls. There you have it. There's your curvature of water into a ball. Well, I can't even believe that somebody would use this, but the reason that raindrops form into a ball is because of a little thing called surface tension, okay? It is the surface tension that keeps the water in that ball. Now, if you have a higher surface tension on another liquid, you can make even bigger balls, right? But we're dealing with water here, and water has a very specific surface tension. It varies microscopically depending on, you know, the other ingredients that may be, or other impurities that may be in water, salt or iron particles or chemicals or whatever. But the bottom line is that water, no matter what, has a fairly consistent surface temperature, or surface tension. What am I saying? Surface tension. And because of that, it is able to roll into a ball as it's traversing down from the heavens or out of your sprinkler or whatever. That is hardly a proof that water can maintain a curvature, you know, around in a 25,000 mile diameter, essentially, or is just simply not possible. Now, another thing that people will use as an example is if you take and you fill up a glass of water and you actually keep filling it once it gets to the top a little bit more, and what you'll notice is that water will actually kind of go over the top of the rim of the glass, okay? And it will do it to about maybe an 1/8 or a 1/16 of an inch over the top, and it does that and it holds itself there, again, due to surface tension. This is absolutely normal in water. It certainly does not prove that it can curve in a ball the size of the Earth, but people actually try to use that as an explanation for water actually curving.
And it only curves on the, sorry Bob, it only curves on the very edge as it reaches the rim. It doesn't, it's not a continuous curve around the top. It's
You're right.
flat and then curves at the very edges.
You're right. You're absolutely right, Antonio, and that's a very important point, actually, because even though it makes that surface temperature curve at the edge of the glass, still along the main plane across the top of that water, it's absolutely 100% flat, okay? Now, there is no evidence anywhere that refutes this. Ballers, bring it on if you got it, but I know it doesn't exist, and so do you. So I maintain that my number 2 fact, water always finds its level, is an absolute proof positive fact that the world is flat. Okay? Which brings us to number 1. And this is something that I have done a lot of research in. And you guys still hearing me okay?
Yeah, I'm sitting here smiling because I know what you're going to say.
Okay. I'm just making sure. All right. Number 1. The number 1 reason, here it is, gyroscopes, prove unequivocally, beyond any doubt whatsoever, 2 things actually. 1, that there is no curvature of the Earth, and 2, that there is no motion to the Earth. Now, I'm all ready for all of the, you know, backlash and all the stuff like that. And in fact, one of the first people I'm going to go on is there is this wonderful video done in total ignorance by Lord Stephen Christ, who comes on and he says, well, got news for you guys. gyroscopes have this thing called Schuler tuning on them, and it is because of this Schuler tuning that it proves beyond any doubt whatsoever that the Earth is, of course, concave. That would be his take on it. Not only does it not prove that it's not concave, it also proves that it's not convex either, because Stephen Christ, you know, for being the imaginative Lord that he is, obviously has never bothered to read any further about what Schuler tuning actually is and how it is actually applied. I'm going to explain that and elaborate a little bit on this for you guys so that we can kind of dispel the Schuler tuning myth. Now, I did cover this 2 or 3 weeks ago already, and granted, I had never heard of it before. And you know, even being a pilot for 35 years, I had never heard of it before. Even working in radio shops, right along people that had airframe and power plant licenses that were working on avionics and aircraft radio, still never had come across it. Why? Because it's basically a fantasy. Here's the deal with Schuler tuning. Schuler tuning describes a procedure to affect an inertial navigation system to compensate for a theoretical curvature of the Earth. Of all the navigation systems I have seen or asked others about that work in the industry, this modification seems to be conspicuously not used. Okay? Now, let's look at what Wiki says about Schuler tuning. All right? So it says Schuler tuning is a modification to the electronic control system used in inertial navigation systems. Now, this is important right here, and we'll address this in a second. That accounts for the curvature of the Earth. Okay? An inertial navigation system used in submarines, ships, aircraft, and other vehicles to keep track of position determines directions with respect to 3 axes pointing northeast and down to detect To detect a vehicle's orientation, the system contains an inertial platform mounted on gimbals with gyroscopes that keep it pointing in a fixed orientation in space. However, the directions northeast and down change as the vehicle moves on the curved surface of the Earth. Schuler tuning describes the modifications necessary to an inertial navigation system to keep the inertial platform always pointing northeast, south, down, yada, yada, yada. Okay, well, first of all, we have to look and say, okay, well, what's the inertial navigation system? Okay, so we look at that. So an INS is a navigation aid that uses a computer, first and foremost, and that is also huge. Motion sensors, accelerometers, and rotation sensors, gyroscopes, to continuously calculate via dead reckoning the position, orientation, and velocity of a moving object without the need for external references. Okay, so let me break this down and tell you what this is actually saying. All right, so before I do that, let's jump over here to the other thing that it talked about, inertial platform, which is basically a gyroscopic platform or a stabilized platform using gyroscopes to maintain a platform in a fixed orientation in space, blah, 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 blah. Okay, but let's go back to this. So what they're talking about here is Schuler tuning is a system that describes modification to an inertial navigation system, which, first of all, an inertial navigation system, as we have already described, requires the use of a computer. All right, well, that, first of all, should raise a lot of red flags to anybody that was a pilot before 25 years ago, which would be me, and many, many other people on the Earth. And the reason being is because we were not using computers in our aircraft, you know, at that time or any time since the Wright brothers to compensate for the curvature of the Earth. It's utterly nonsense. Okay, so what it's doing, what they're saying is that this modification brought about by Schuler tuning, which is using a computer to affect a navigation system. Now, first of all, let me tell you what the navigation system is that they're describing. These navigation systems are not in use in most aircraft today. They are in use in a large amount of the airliners, but as far as to the total percentage of all aircraft on Earth, not even a drop in the bucket, okay? So what this is saying is that the inertial navigation system which would be a complete autopiloting system, which would allow you to take off, fly your route, do your landing, all that stuff, all by computer control automatically. It is the Schuler tuning that is a procedure that describes how to modify an already existing internal navigation system to compensate for the curvature of the Earth, whether it be from GPS data, which, by the way, is not existent for that particular function, or some other methodology, which there is another methodology, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. But the bottom line is it's talking about modifying an existing navigation system that would be of the high order of technology anyway, that never even existed before 25, 30 years ago. Okay, so even if it were true, which it isn't, but even if it were true that it were modifying the orientation of the gyros to keep consistent with so that the gyroscope is at a constant 90-degree angle perpendicular to the center point of the Earth, which would be directly below it, there is no way to necessarily do this. And I can tell you that all navigation systems, that are not navigation systems, but navigation equipment that most airplanes use, which is a gyroscope for your artificial horizon, for your turn and slip indicator, for your rate of climb, all of those are based on straight up gyroscopes with absolutely no modification to them to change any orientation to the gyro itself to compensate for gravity or for the curvature of the Earth, because the whole idea is to keep the gyroscope plane at a perfect 90-degree angle to the spot that's directly below you that goes all the way to the center of the Earth. Okay, so first of all, Schuler turning is not even used in the majority of these systems. Now, another thing that they will talk about is there's another type of gyro that is fairly new, not hugely new, but that uses, instead of electric motors to power up the flywheel on the gyroscope, it uses vanes and air pressure. Okay, so another model that came up, and I was discussing this with Curious Life of a Flat Earther, that he caught a lot of rebuttal on, was these vanes that are supposedly in the bottom. Not supposedly, they actually are there, I will admit that, at the bottom of the gyroscopic structure that take the air that is blown across the vanes that spin the gyro, and according to gravity, or the orientation of the plane, it will open one of 4 air gates to be able to discharge the air that is spinning up the gyro. Well, that's all great. Now, first of all, like I said, this is something that's relatively new. Before that, they simply used electric motors to spin up the gyros. However, there are magnetic fields and other things that can cause problems with that, even though they work well for the most part. This air drive is supposedly a better system. So great. But what they're saying then is that if you modify the aircraft, okay, its trajectory or its angle, that what will happen is that the gyro will stay rigid in space, because that's what gyros do. They stay rigid in space no matter what the orientation of the plane is around it, okay? But they're saying that when you go into like a 60-degree turn, for example, the gyroscope is going to stay rigid in space, but because the air vane that is discharging the air that is spinning up the gyro is kind of at the sump of the gyroscopic mechanism, that it will open one of 4 corresponding gates, one for each direction, northeast, southwest, and it will kind of force the line of gravity so that the gyroscope goes back to a perfect 90-degree perpendicular line to an imaginary line that goes down to the center of the Earth. Well, first of all, that's silly, because if you could do that simply by blowing air across some sort of a gate, you've got to take into consideration a million other factors, like what is the resistance of that gate to the air? In other words, what if it's sticky? how much air is actually going across it. You have surface contacts. You have a million things that have to be taken into consideration. But as far as it making any type of precision adjustment, that's simply impossible. What it actually does, what these air gates actually do, is they act as a dampening system. There are two mechanisms in a gyro that prevents it from spinning around in circles, and that is if you're in an aerobatics plane and you do a roll or a loop or something like that, obviously the cage would be rotating all the way around the gyroscope, and it would cause everything to, you know, kind of run amok. But what they do is they put limits in on the gimbals that hold the gyroscope, so that once you go past 60 or 70 degrees, something like that, or maybe even more, there's a mechanical lock there that prevents it from going any further. Okay, now what the air pressure does going through those relief gates at the bottom, those discharge gates, is it acts more of a dampening mechanism, so that you don't have such a wildly gyrating artificial horizon when you've come out of some sort of a high-speed maneuver that requires a lot of banking or, you know, hard turning or something like that. So the bottom line is that neither the air vanes at the bottom of the air-driven gyroscopes used to exist in the past. They were all motor-driven. And secondly, the computers to drive inertial navigation systems are only something that, you know, in the past few decades that have come about to even be able to allow an airplane to be computer controlled. And so what happened to the 60 or 70 years before that, when pilots were flying international flights, yada, yada, yada? In other words, the whole idea of the Schuler tuning of a navigation system that hasn't existed except for the last few decades is utter bullshit. Okay, so what gyroscopes really do is, their claim to fame is they have a rigidity in space. Okay, now you can buy a gyroscope. People have used gyroscopes for years. They're toys. They also make extremely high-end gyroscopes that are precision machined that will run for a long, long time, 20, 30 minutes, you know, on a spin. They also have them now where you can use little electric motors externally to spin them up to around 8,000 RPM. Well, this is something that was never done, never able to be done, you know, back in the days of antiquity, when, for example, Foucault did his gyroscopic experiments. And Foucault is kind of credited for all of this, by the way. Not only was his pendulum bullshit, but he also lied about his results on gyroscopes. And I guess where I'm going with this is there's a Navy video, and I've got it here, and I will actually also post this. And where is it? The Navy video, that's not it. Okay, but that is. Okay, so here's the Navy aviation training film. And what they say in this makes perfect logical sense for any gyro. And they say that because gyros maintain a rigidity in space, that you can change the orientation of the gimbals all around them that are attached to it, but the gyro will stay right there. Okay? So Foucault allegedly did an experiment where he and his cheesy 200-year-old gyro, supposedly, he was able to spin it up and actually see precession in the gyro, which would have indicated and proved motion, angular motion most specifically, brought about by the rotation of the Earth. Well, that's all fine and dandy, except that everybody that has performed this experiment since he's done it, and with far better equipment, has failed to get any results that even remotely come close to what Foucault claimed that he had. A good example, Rob Durham bought an extremely high precision gyroscope, did the precession test. Guess what? He let it run for, well, quite a while, and he had calculated the precession based on his latitude, and of course the gyroscope did not move at all. There is another guy, Yeoman P, that here's his video, where he let it run for 6 hours, and it detected absolutely zero motion. Well, a lot of people came back, and their debunks was, well, the gyroscope simply was not sensitive enough to measure this movement of the Earth. which is, of course, ludicrous, because if Foucault could do it, several hundred years ago with his cheesy gyroscopes, the notion that we couldn't replicate it today with high-end, 21st century engineered gyroscopes, and also we have the advantage of motors, which will keep that gyro spinning continuously, and we still cannot duplicate it. That tells me that Foucault lied. It also tells me that if in our airplane, going back to my Cessna that I rented years ago when I was first getting my private pilot's license, that had a gyroscope in it that had to be calibrated on the ground. In other words, you cage the instrument while you are on the ground, and caging is simply nothing more than setting the azimuth into the gyroscope while it's calibrated on a level surface on the ground. And when you cage it, that's the last place that you calibrate your gyros. Once you take off, the gyros continuously run, and the only thing that you correct is heading due to magnetic declination. And this is something that's a routine practice for pilots. But the bottom line is that if there were any curvature at all, not only would the gyroscope detect it in an airplane, it would detect that ridiculous amount of curvature that I was talking about earlier, that you'd have to be compensating at the rate of 2,800 foot per minute in a standard jet airliner. But guess what? The gyroscope simply does not detect that. Why doesn't it detect it? Because there's no curvature to the Earth. End of story. There's so many things that prove this, and anybody that thinks that there is any modification going on to the gyroscopic mechanism itself that is modifying for the curvature of the Earth is deluded, and they simply have not done their homework and looked into these, strange phenomena that everybody's touting called Schuler tuning, or the air discharge vanes at the bottom of the gyroscopic gimbal structure. Doesn't exist. Doesn't exist. Didn't exist 30 years ago when I got my pilot's license. You are never, ever trained to compensate for Coriolis, curvature of the Earth. You are never trained on the instruments. In fact, it is the very nature of the instruments to fight any sort of curvature or turning away from anything that is perfectly flat level. There are a million people that are going to come back with a million rebuttals to this, and I say bring them on, because whatever you bring back, I would suggest you really research it deeply, and then fine. If you find something that's great, present it to me. I will be happy to personally debate this with you, because I've done, for the last 3 weeks, I've done nothing but research this, and I'm telling you, the gyroscopes, contrary to the people in the chat that are claiming that they prove the ball Earth, do anything but that. They prove the flat Earth. Not only do they prove the flat Earth, but they prove the motionless flat Earth. So any comments, guys?
Just wow. Just that. Just.
Yeah, I think gyroscopes are it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Gyroscopes really are it. So guys, this is, like I said, the top three are all good, but gyroscopes, people are going to make an issue over this. They're going to make an issue over Schuler tuning. There's a lot of information out there, but the fact is that nobody is using it. And I also, by the way, am going to be visiting, I was going to do this before today, but I am going to be visiting the avionics repair shop at Denver International Airport, because I can. And I'm going to go there and I'm going to talk to these guys, but I already know what they're going to say. But I'm going to get it straight from the horse's mouth, where they're going to say simply that Schuler tuning does not exist, especially in general aviation aircraft, because most general aviation aircraft do not have full-blown automatic pilot systems that will, take over a flight, long distance across country or across the world or whatever. They simply have navigation systems that are gyroscopically based. There is no fancy computer technology that's modifying the orientation of the gyroscope. There is no, and honestly, if air vents at the bottom of a gyro were all it took to maintain horizontal orientation in an aircraft, then what the hell would we need gyroscopes for in the first place? Why would we need any of that instrumentation if we could just hang a flippin' pendulum, from the ceiling of the aircraft, right? Well, you can't, because it doesn't work that way, okay? So there they are. Top 3 proofs, gyros being number 1. You cannot debunk gyros. Watch Stephen Christopher's, I hate to say it, but it's an idiotic video and ignorant.
Hey, that's the Lord. Watch out.
That's the Lord. I'm sorry, Lord. But, whatever. It's ignorant and it's ridiculous, and you simply didn't do your homework, Stephen. You don't know what you're talking about, and you're surely not a pilot. You may be God, but you're not a pilot, so your opinion don't count. Got news for you. So, and I don't mean to be all cocky about this, but I get so freaking sick and tired of hearing these lame arguments, for the globe. And I just thought, hey, you know what? It's time to come out and say, screw the preponderance of evidence. Let's go for the hardcore proofs. Ladies and gentlemen, you have got my top 3. I stand by all 3 of them as being absolutely undebunkable. I stand by all 3 of them as proving unequivocally that the Earth is flat. Does that mean that it makes me a map? Nope, doesn't make me a map. Still working on that part, but what it does prove is that the Earth is flat. There you have it.
Bong.
Kabong.
Nice.
All right, so yeah, and that puts us over our 3 hours. So, Jaron, did you have anything that you wanted to bring forward to the last of this blaster? Because I can hardly wait for the backlash on this. We may have to do a whole other show on it next week, but whatever.
Let me show you. I'll show you one image here in a second.
Okay.
That I think should, show a lot as far as what we see in the sky that everyone thinks is the moon and what way it faces. 1 second. Oopsie. And I would just say the only thing I know it's not really proof, but I'm still waiting for somebody to get back to me on how exactly you can test for the vacuum of space on Earth. How can we test anything? They're making satellites, they're making rockets, and they just know what space is like, even though you cannot replicate that on Earth. You have a vacuum chamber with a ceiling and floors and walls, which is nothing like the vacuum of space. So I still don't understand how it can ever be tested at all. So that's one thing.
Yep.
Let me show you this picture. Copy image address. Okay, I'm going to drop it in the box there. And then, hopefully everyone sees it the same way I do, because to me it shows, you can't even be sure which way the moon is. That's a bowl. But if you look at that bowl, it certainly could be seen as bowing towards you.
Yeah, I've actually thought that several times, Jaron, that rather than the Earth being a ball, or excuse me, rather than the moon being a ball, because the lighting is not consistent with the ball because you have no diminishing of the light at the edges, that it was either more likely a flat circle or possibly a little bit concave, which is what you're showing here. And that would explain the light illuminating the entire disk of the moon.
And it would match a dome.
Right. Yeah, it certainly would, wouldn't it? I never even thought about that. So yeah, a concave move, I'm open to that idea. But concave only in the sense that it's flat concave. I don't believe the moon is a sphere. I know a lot of people do believe this, but I certainly don't have enough evidence to back that claim. That's my personal belief, so don't get nobody get too carried away about that.
Well, if it's a sphere, then they probably believe in the true distance that NASA says, and people need to look into that, because every image you're shown, every diagram that shows the eclipse completely fools you about what really needs to be the case if what they're saying is true. I mean, people don't realize this. Did you know you can put every single planet in between us and the moon? I mean, that's how far away it is, and people don't realize that. And yet you can zoom in with your freaking camera and get right up close details on the mare and the oceans, and there's no way. I mean, it's just simply, if you look at a diagram, look up Earth Moon scale and look how far away the moon is, and then think about what you take pictures of at night. Think about how close it seems, and just realize that it's simply impossible, everything that they try and tell us. and that's the biggest joke. And for me, I mean, just talking about, one of the biggest proofs is when you look at the way you're taught things and why you're taught the way you are, and did we go through any kind of indoctrination to this belief that simply does not make any sense. It's counterintuitive, and we were taught the ball at such a young age. We didn't have a chance to refute it. We just had to accept it, and we were taught that the opposite of that the flat earth was stupid and dumb. I mean, they don't teach anything else as being stupid and dumb, but that in the Bible. These things are ancient beliefs by ancient desert wanderers. Nobody in their right mind has thought that in hundreds of years or thousands of years, and we're shown a globe in every single movie and every single logo. Think of every news company. It doesn't matter what channel, Channel 7, Channel 5, Channel 3, they all have globes, and when they're sitting there and you're watching the news, there's a globe behind them. You look at Joel Osteen, he's got a huge globe, rotates around behind him. I mean, we were taught that water goes down the drain the opposite way. We found out that's not true. So you're finding out that even lies, Coriolis, Foucault, that we're being told lies in order to get across the truth. It just doesn't make sense. It's not the way things go. And for everybody out there who still doesn't believe in the flat earth or thinks that it's still a globe, you need to look at the amount of people who now believe in the flat earth and just think this. Imagine what you have to go through mentally to say, you know what, I'm going to give up what I've been taught, give up what has been called fact, give up what scientists say is true, give up what everybody I know says is true, because what I was taught was stupid has enough credibility that it outweighs the problems with what I was taught was fact. That is ridiculous. There should be nothing that does that. There should be nothing that ever even comes close to taking away what scientists call as fact, that's tested, that's peer-reviewed. I mean, it's just ridiculous that people don't see that these people, we're not all idiots. If it was just me and I came out with a video and had a couple followers and everyone saying you're an idiot, maybe I would have backed away and said, oh, maybe it's just me who sees this. But the more you talk about it, the more people email me, the more people message me, the more people we see making videos, making their own videos. And they're not doing that just because they feel like being stupid and being called stupid by you. Believe me.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely true, Jaron. And that makes perfect sense. The biggest thing in looking at this is to kind of step back and take the common sense approach to a lot of this. Yes, our eyes can be deceived. Yes, they are often deceived. In fact, I love optical illusions and things like that, and we play around with them all the time. In an effort to understand perspective. But for the most part, when you go out and you look at something, what you see is what you get. I was talking about a video that Curious Life of a Flat Earther did describing the gyroscopic function of eyes, and that's something that I have never thought of about eyes. But one of the points that he made is like, if you look at something, if you stand in front of a mirror and look at a certain object that's in the mirror and then tilt your head, you'll notice that your eyes aren't changing directions or anything like that, but what your brain is doing is your brain is automatically compensating for the image that your eye is perceiving kind of gyroscopically. The same goes for perception. When we look at something off in the distance, our eyes are giving us the reference to the horizon that is all critical in being able to orient ourselves spatially to where we are, whether we're going up a hill, down a hill, or anything like that. So really, the human body is an amazing, amazing contraption. It really is. Not something that I believe that was just brought about by freak accident, but there is so obviously very, very clear design and brilliant design in it. Anybody that says that this is just a complete happenstance really needs to have their head examined. Anybody that believes in evolution theory. Yeah, it's stupid.
It's like, how is that not creation? It's like the stupid creationist. I believe in the Big Bang, which is different because things were created out of nothing from space. So
spontaneously, yes.
Yeah, spontaneously, like that's different than creation somehow. I don't know. I just think that that's all you need to know. You just said it perfectly. There's no 24/7 camera from the ISS. Another big one. If it were true, Believe me, they'd have that. They've been up there 16 years. There's no reason why you don't. And the only other thing I would describe, and I don't have a drawing for this, you'll just have to picture it. Imagine you're on a beach 10 miles across from me, and the boat starts going out from me, and it goes over my horizon. The boat disappears. So supposedly that went over the edge of the earth. Now the person on the other side, let's say a boat at the same time mine left, theirs left. Well, they would also see the boat go over after 3 or 4 miles their horizon, but I wouldn't see it yet. Why is that? Is there an indentation in the earth? How could it go over mine and not be seen by him? And that's because it's flat, and you're losing the view of the item through all the mist and everything else in the atmosphere. You're losing it. And as far as why you see it go below the water line, we've seen that a million times. It's simply swell, which doesn't mean that water doesn't lie flat, because it's moving. It's not curving around a ball. It's simply kind of going back and forth with the waves, and you see the water get higher, which hides the boat behind it. It's all pretty self-explanatory, and they're lying to you when they tell you it's going over the edge. It makes no sense. Think about that Red's Rhetoric video that he has some sailboat that within within, I don't know, half hour or 20 minutes, the whole mast is gone. Think about how far that boat would have to go on. Everybody says the Earth is so giant, you're so miniature compared to the giant Earth. Well, I just saw a little miniature boat go over the curvature enough that I can still see the top of its flag a little bit. Like, think of how far away that would have to go from you to see it actually disappear that much on water. It simply is not what's happening, and you can believe what men who take your money tell you all you want. But I think you should prove things at this point. Don't just listen to Lawrence Krauss without saying, hey, don't say that, liar.
Right. And above that, when people are making claims about certain things, proving this or that, go into it further than what they have presented. I'm inviting everyone. In fact, I'm insisting that everyone take every bit of evidence that I have presented here today and my words and scrutinize them heavily. Don't just listen to what I'm saying. Don't just listen to the results of my research. Verify it for yourself. Otherwise, what you're going to do is you're going to go to, Stephen Christ's video here, and you're going to watch this, and you're going to think that just because, Stephen's a smart guy, that he actually knows what the hell he's talking about when it comes to Schuler tuning. Well, sorry, you find out, and this, I found this out with less than an hour's worth of research, that everything he said in this video was utter bollocks. It was complete nonsense. It's clear that he's cherry picking this whole Schuler tuning idea to push the agenda of his concave model. Well, it doesn't work on a convex Earth, and it sure as hell doesn't work on a concave Earth. And that's because Schuler tuning is something that is essentially non-existent for the most part, and if it is used only in the most advanced of guidance systems, not in general aviation aircraft, and not even in commercial aircraft, because like I said, I'm going to be visiting the people in the avionics shop this week. I already know what they're going to say, but I'm going to go there and do it just so I don't make a liar out of myself. And I know that there will be no Schuler tuning apparatus or mechanism that's making any modifications to these aircraft gyroscopic navigation systems. And if there are, I will be happy to get the full-blown documentation on how they work, because obviously I would like to know that, and as a pilot, probably a good thing that I do know that. But otherwise, those systems simply are not in use if they exist at all. And remember, Schuler tuning is nothing more than describing a methodology to modify an already existing computer-controlled navigation system. If you don't have that, you don't have Schuler tuning. It's not even part of the equation. End of story. So anyway, with that, I guess we're coming up on 3.5 hours. Antonio, if you have anything, I know you've got your debate coming up with John LeBon next week, and I think you've just taken a whole lot of the wind out of his sails with his nonstop argument of what about the spinning pole stars at the South Pole, which frankly I get sick of hearing, but it's going to be interesting to see his rebuttal to this, and if he tries to continue to use that in your debate against you. But other than that, you got anything else good going on we need to know about before we close out?
Well, I'll be making a video on the flat Earth map, which anybody can make themselves. If you take the square mileage of the continents, you'll find that the square mileage of Africa is just over 11 million square miles, and the square mileage of Eurasia, that's Europe and Asia combined, is just over 22 million square miles. That's twice the size of Africa. So take your A map, take any map, and just make the adjustment. Make Eurasia twice the size of Africa, if we're going to use Africa as the rule of thumb. And then there you go. You've got the flat Earth map. We can land surveyors aren't interested in globe or flat. They're just interested in square meters, square miles. So we can assume that they're pretty correct and exact, especially because property rights go along with the square mileage, and that's linked to law, and we know how exacting they can be. So just have a look for yourselves, but I will be creating a map. I won't be pulling a Tiger Dan. I'll be using some things that can be verified. I'll then be demonstrating how this is verifiable also by the sun's journey. So I will do this before the JLB debate so that I can show it on the debate, but I thought that I would show. I was going to keep the star trail, star motions secret until JLB, but I thought, no, if I show it today, he has a week to think about it, because I thought if I foisted it on him on the debate, he might say, I haven't had enough time to analyze this, can we move on? In which case it would be unfair of me to say, nope, I want you to address this. So he's got a whole week to address it. And what you said, Jaron, which is true, the synthetic approach, we need to actually look at the stars ourselves to see how they move. We can't assume that the Celestia and the other programs that tell us that there's counterspin, that we can't assume that they're telling us the truth. Only the real world is going to tell us the truth. So, yeah. So that's it. That's the news from me.
Beautiful. All right. That ought to be interesting. I'll be looking forward to seeing that, and I'll definitely be there in the crowd cheering you on during the debate. But honestly, I don't think you're going to have too much problem because, frankly, you just kind of took away that John LeBon's his legs to stand on, essentially. Other than that, he doesn't have much. I will give him credit. Yeah. he's just stuck. He's stuck in the middle. That's the problem. I find that so ironic that he uses that theme song for "Stuck in the Middle with You" by Steelers Wheel, and and he's kind of oriented himself in the position, that it's not a globe, it's not a flat Earth, it's not a concave Earth, it's not a hollow Earth. So John LeBon just doesn't live anywhere, and the whole notion of acting like he's cute, doubting and debating everything, that has some merit to a degree, but the level that he's taking it to has just turned it into an absolute clown show, and that is my opinion of what he's doing. I used to really think that he had a lot of great information, and he is still very capable of putting out that great information. He just did a piece on the Cavendish experiment, showing the absurdity of it, and that's great, but and he actually had very sound and logical arguments, but you cannot be so non-committal. You're trying to disprove everything without ever offering proof for any other specific model, which kind of invalidates everything that you say. And John, I really hope that you take that to heart and listen to what I just said there, and drop your videos, bring your videos back to doing something constructive instead of simply trying to mock everything that I say, playing it back and asking everybody's opinions on it. If you want to know people's opinions on what I say, why don't you just read the comments, in the Globebusters comment groups. That's all fine and dandy. So,
yeah. My comment on him would be, because I have always liked him a lot too, but recently it frustrates me because as if we don't have enough to deal with the globe believers. And what maybe he forgets is that, do you realize that the globe is being taught in schools, being taught to children? So while you're dilly-dallying in the middle, every kid is coming out of school with the belief that what they're being taught is absolute fact. It's been tested. It's gone through scientific review, peer review, and that's not the case. And once we've gotten to this point, which I know you have, you now know the problems that are in the globe model. So rather than attack those, you've turned your attention on attacking flat earthers or both or whatever, to the point where some people have to do shows in response to you. So that's all I got to say about that. And I think that's it. Tomorrow night, Monday nights, we're on TFR, my wife and I, for Raw, Jeranism Raw, so check that out. And starting tomorrow, we got given an extra hour. So we're going 9 to midnight Pacific. And there is also a Jeranism Raw YouTube channel. If you subscribe there, we're starting tomorrow night from 11 to 12. We're just trying tomorrow night for 1 hour to go live during Raw. So could go well, could go really bad, but who knows? We'll be there.
Yep.
It'll be good.
Awesome. All right. All right, guys. And, well, I guess with that then, we will call it a day, and hopefully we got our message out. It's going to be interesting to see the backlash of this video. But like I said, people, there's always multiple sides to a story, and you know, you just need to continuously look deeper and do not take anybody's word as dogmatic. This is my research, it's my belief, and that's fine that it's my belief, and nobody can ever take that away from me. But I will say that my belief is subject to change given the right amount and the correct type of evidence to debunk it. I'm perfectly open to saying, hey, I was wrong. And let's look at it from a different point of view. So anyway, one thing, there's a guy that keeps wanting me to promote something, and Alex Jones apparently is going online right about now. And he's going to have open phone lines, and he's urging people to call in at 877-789-ALEX or 512-646-1776. So if you want to call in and give Alex Jones schooling on Flat Earth, knock yourself out. So just thought I'd get that out there. Other than that, that's about all I have. Thanks everybody for joining us this week. We apologize for not having a show last week, but we're very happy that Jeremy got his dog back. And of course, as you already know, we took Mother's Day off, and actually had a really good day that day as well. So with that, we're out of here, and we will catch everybody next week. So remember to be good to each other. Don't lie to each other. Open your mind. There is truth inside. Peace out, everybody.
Peace.
Peace.